Welcome to Senpai, your new home for immersive manga, manhwa, anime-inspired novels, and fantasy audiobook stories. Here, every episode brings you into a world of overpowered heroes, revenge arcs, cultivation journeys, virtual reality games, monsters, magic, and emotional character moments. Whether you enjoy dark fantasy, action, reincarnation, system stories, or epic adventure novels, Senpai is here to turn every chapter into a cinematic listening experience. So relax, put on your headphones, and let the story begin. Subscribe to Senpai and join the journey.
Swoosh! I could feel the hot air brushing against my body. Opening my eyes, I was in a desert. More precisely, my team was currently teleported into a desert. Below us, I could see a huge teleportation device, with the portal just closing behind. And it wasn't just us. As I scanned my surroundings, I could see many of the students were feeling a little dizzy, a side effect of instant teleportation, but once you got used to it, the effect would reduce. The interesting part was that there were no instructors around us. Before leaving, each student was given a smart bracelet that they had to wear on their wrists at all times. It was to measure the kill counts. The bracelet also had the feature of showing the rankings of all groups and an inbuilt protection shield. We had been informed that if the bracelet detected an attack greater than what you could defend against, it would automatically activate a shield, thereby saving the given student's life. But the student would be eliminated, and the group would face a penalty. The rules were basic. With the more kills you had, the greater your rank. There's no point in standing here. Saying my part, I began to move in the north direction. There was no specific reason for selecting north. Seeing me move, the others followed through. Taking notice of our group, the other students began to show movement, and I could sense everyone moving out of the teleportation area. Will you be the leader? A feminine voice reached my ears as I was speeding up, with everyone running along. I glanced at the girl, but didn't reply. Seeing my silence as a confirmation, she kept quiet. I thought my attitude would have irked her, but she displayed a surprising calmness without showing any hint of damage to her ego. After all, she was a princess. Vienna Eller, the first princess of House Eller, which was one of the major elven houses in the world. Diplomacy ran in the royal blood, so these individuals were the least likely to be offended by the actions of the people around them. Being a silver 1 ranker showed her potential. Elves were generally more attuned to mana than the other races, as their race was considered the child of nature. They had a greater affinity towards life mana, and hence had a decisive advantage in battles that were fought in the forest. And our current location seemed to be the most disadvantageous for her. But looking at her face, I couldn't see a single shred of anxiety. Vienna was, after all, one of the heroines in the game, so she had to be strong to maintain such character presence. There's this thing called the butterfly effect in most of the fantasy literature that was sold on Earth. But my transmigration didn't seem to create any kind of butterfly effect. It had laid the way for the creation of a much larger effect, or one that I could call a dragon effect. Starting an organization like DXN itself had employed and controlled many villains who could have wreaked havoc in the world and here at the Academy. My intervention had decreased those numbers to a near negligible level. So all these female lead characters in the game had no real meaning in this world as far as I was concerned. They had their uses in the game, as they were the main helpers for Noah, but now, their value had decreased in my mind. Though I couldn't deny their combat prowess. They were still some of the best fighters that history had ever witnessed. After running for a few minutes, we had covered a mile or two. As most of us were silver cores, such distance wasn't taxing on the body. That was my first thought, but as I turned to look at my group, the situation was a bit different from what I expected. The extro, along with another boy, was lying on the ground panting like dogs. I think they were supposed to be at the bronze rank. Even Diana and the elven princess were taking deep breaths, though their condition was far better than the other two. I might have overestimated their capabilities or underestimated mine. I think it was the latter, as my insane regeneration ability had increased my stamina to a far higher level than what a normal silver ranker should be capable of. Are you even human? Vienna asked while gasping at the same time. She was no longer maintaining her calm and composed appearance. Glancing at Diana, I could see her face was pale, but she refrained from commenting. It wasn't even a long run. Everyone had their eyes widened to my statement. I was simply stating the facts. And if you were that tired, you could have informed me earlier. I had, but your ears were deaf to my request, as you just kept running like a bull. Vienna raised her voice slightly, but noticing her behavior, forced herself to calm down. Was I too engrossed in my thinking? Honestly, I didn't really hear anything. And it wasn't the distance that mattered, but the speed at which you were running. We had to overextend our mana just to keep up with you. And you know what the worst part feels like? You didn't even look like you were putting in any effort during the run. Clenching her fists, Vienna raised them to show her frustration. She looked quite adorable in that pose, but I wasn't someone who fell for such things. People who liked girls doing what they call these girly things. I just think those were idiots with no rational thoughts. Hey, listen. Vienna stepped closer to me, raising her index finger to my level. I know you're stronger than me. Stronger than everyone in this year, but that doesn't give you the right to humiliate me. You get that. Wasn't she supposed to be a calm and collected princess? Did every character's personality have such deviations from the game, or was this kid an exception? I kept staring at Vienna a moment longer before turning my attention towards the rest. On our way, we had encountered no monsters. Vienna had a look of disbelief on her face as I ignored her. That might have been due to the fact that the area was near the teleportation passage. Don't space out, and be careful of your surroundings. In a desert like this, the thing we have to be most cautious about dash. Before I could finish my sentence, the ground below us began sinking deeper. Move! Noticing the abnormality, along with my shout, seemed to have knocked some sense into my teammates as they jumped out of the pit. I took out the sword from my storage before jumping high up in the air. In a fraction of a second, a mouth appeared at the place we were standing moments prior. Before anyone could process it, a huge centipede jumped out from the ground, its jaw directly below me. Tensing my muscles, I spun mid-air before positioning myself just at the side of the centipede's mouth. Spurt! With a quick slash, its mouth detached from the body, leaving the creature dead. As I landed on the ground, I could see the clear look of astonishment on my teammates' faces. There's no need to stare at me. As I said, maintain your focus in areas like this desert. The main predators here are these centipedes, as they could attack you anytime, depending upon the rhythm that your footsteps create. And how did you even notice that monster before the ground even shook? Extro asked in disbelief. The centipedes follow the vibrations that your movement creates in the sand below. So to identify them, you have to do the same thing, just in a reverse mechanism. Feel for the vibrations in the ground below from time to time. You can even use Mana Sense Dash. You know how to use Mana Sense? This time it was Diana who asked quietly. Though I could feel the surprise in her voice, she did a good job at hiding it. Yes. And there's no need to fret if you can't use it. Just physically feeling the vibrations is enough, along with the hollow cavity that's created in the sand once the centipede approaches closer to the surface. What's there to fret about? Mana Sense isn't something that silver cores can use. TSK trying to flex. I could hear Vienna pouting in the corner in a barely audible voice. Was she trying to pick a fight? Though she wasn't entirely wrong. One could only use Mana Sense after becoming a platinum ranker. I forgot that not everyone had the same level of mana control as me. Is that clear? Yes. Seeing everyone nod, I placed the sword back in my storage. As the centipede was of bronze rank, I had received 2 points for the kill. The bracelet also showed individual score rankings along with the group ranking. My kill must have been the first one, as my name appeared on the scoreboard with a score of 2 points, as did the name of our group in the overall rankings. For the group name, all our names were mentioned in a compact space. Sensing Diana's gaze on me, I turned to look at her. Yes. Why did you withdraw your weapon? Don't we have to kill more? Her face had a light frown. Though her relations with me, or the past me, weren't the best, she must have decided to keep the past separate from the present. At least that was my analysis. Maybe for the group ranking, she was curbing her desire to question me about anything related to the past, or if she had any questions at all, though I guess she did want to talk, from the brief glances that she kept giving me occasionally. They weren't provocative, so I had decided to let the matter rest. Still, I had to form a natural positive, or at the least a neutral, impression before her, so as to make her feel more comfortable with me. But I wasn't going to do that by sacrificing my dignity. So this measured approach was the best for now. The one thing I hate the most is people leeching off me. So I won't interfere in the battles from now on. You are on your own if you want to get a good ranking in the year. Well, that was a half-truth. I would be participating as each student was going to be evaluated individually along with their group. What? Do you think we are some parasites that need you to babysit us? Vienna was the first one to raise her voice. Maybe. My answer was short yet effective, as could be seen from her expression. Vienna began to move in my direction before being stopped by Diana midway. Let's just focus on the practical, okay? And it's not like we're dependent on him, so why the worry? Though Diana had said it to de-escalate the situation, why did I feel like the question was more of a taunt for me? Still, I can't completely leave you to your own devices, as I don't like to be placed anywhere lower than first rank. So I will be instructing you in your fights, a sort of strategist. Who needs dash? All right, we will follow your lead, Kael. Extro interrupted before Vienna could speak again. I glanced at him, only for the boy to stumble back. Sir, I mean, HM, did he think I was offended? But finding no reason to correct him, I nodded my head in acknowledgement. I mean, it's not like I hate being respected or feared. So what are you waiting for? Take your weapons out. Shink. Seeing that everyone had their weapons out, I allowed my mana sense to spread outward, searching for more monsters. There it was. Follow me. Within a radius of 50 meters, I could feel the centipede searching for the lost vibrations of our footsteps. But this time, it was us who approached it. Anyone with earth affinity softened the sand in the radius of 2 meters around us. Okay. Surprisingly, it was the big guy who answered first. Without waiting for anyone, I willed my mana to control the mana particles in the air around us. As the sand had been softened, more air entered the ground through the pores. Be ready. With a shallow breath, I willed all the air in the softened sand to mix with the surroundings, resulting in immediate collapse of the land around us. Now, the centipede, feeling the lack of air, burst out from the ground in a heartbeat. But this time, everyone was ready. Big guy, tank the attack. Me. Roger. Extro and Vienna, attack it from the sides. Huh? Extro. Yes, you. And Diana, circle it from behind. Why are we being so careful? It's a mere bronze centipede. Vienna's impatient voice echoed through the dry sands. Learn to coordinate first. Tisk. Making a displeased face, Vienna attacked the centipede from the side, along with Extro. As for Diana, she obeyed my orders and circled the monster from behind. Being flanked from all sides, the centipede chose to attack the big guy first, but its attempt was stopped midway by the combined assault from the three sides. Extro, being a bronze core, didn't leave much damage on the hard shell of the monster. But Diana, along with the elven princess, left deep gashes across its body, leading to the creature roaring in pain. With a warcry-type shout, the big guy attacked the monster from the front, his broadsword piercing deep into its neck. Thud! The lifeless body of the centipede hit the ground. Our bracelets buzzed at the same time, showing an increase in the total points of our group. More are coming. Everyone had a serious look on their face as the ground beneath us shook in several places. The vibrations made by the battle had attracted more monsters. You can kill them on your own, but make sure to watch your back. Informing them of the basics, I withdrew from the scene, standing far away from the places that the centipedes were trying to attack from. My team was fairly strong. Vienna had the natural affinity for life mana that could be used to control plants, though this desert limited such an approach. I didn't know Diana's affinity, or affinities, as being a royal, made her body capable enough to control different types of mana. The same as Vienna, who might also be able to control mana aside from life mana. Extro was average, while the big guy had a bit of talent in controlling earth mana. This was what I had always liked about this game. The developers had kept the power, scaling realistic, and not entirely fantastical. Normally, in many games, characters had a specific affinity to a mana type and could only use spells in regard to that particular mana. But here there was no such thing as a fixed affinity. The bodies of every individual could control all types of mana to a certain extent. It was just that some individuals had more control over certain types of mana. Still, it was different from having a fixed affinity, where the general perception was that the user could only use spells of a given type. Then, there was the misconception of individuals with water affinity not being able to use spells under the fire affinity. So in general, the concept was grounded in reality. As for the spells, those were complex uses of a particular mana and couldn't be used by everyone. An individual could control mana, like the big guy softening the sand below us, but that didn't necessarily mean that the big guy would be able to use a spell related to earth mana. Spells were hard to understand and interpret. Even if you knew the mechanics behind them, these spells were created by people centuries ago. So the mechanics of a spell that was used by its creator weren't necessarily suitable for the body of every other individual. Each individual had a different mana signature, and that changed the way they could use a spell. So utilizing a spell in combat meant not only understanding it, but also improvising the spell to suit your own needs. The changes that had to be made weren't huge, but making even a slight change required years of study and practice. That was why only people with years of experience and a higher core rank were able to effectively use spells. On average, among diamond rankers, each individual had the capability to cast 5 or 6 spells, depending on their affinity to utilize a particular type of mana. That itself explained the rarity of individuals who could cast spells, and even among them, the number of spells that could be cast wasn't high. That was why the immortals were so feared across the world. They were effectively one with nature, which allowed them to easily comprehend the mechanics behind several spells, as the mana in nature coexisted with their own mana essence. Still, such difficulties didn't stop people from using fake spells. These were spells that couldn't create the real effect, but could allow the cultivator to attain some level of control over the mana matter. Why are their shells so damn hard? Extro shouted as a centipede had brushed off his attack and was nearly on the way to devour him. But Diana stepped in between. Stepping gracefully atop the centipede, she pierced her sword through its head. Though her action seemed simple, I could see the immense amount of mana that she had used to generate sufficient strength in order to pierce the creature's skull. In my opinion, it was a waste of mana. Try to aim for the weak points. The skull is the hardest to strike. I gave a word of advice across the vast distance between us. Diana looked up to meet my gaze before diving down the monster's body. There was still a lot to kill. I briefly glanced at the bracelet, only to see our group in third place with a score of 32 points. And not surprisingly, the first group was that of Noah, standing at 60 points. It hadn't been that long since the test had begun, and their group had almost twice the number of points we had accumulated so far. Though in their case, I could see Noah alone having 40 points to his name. He must have been killing the silver rank monsters. That explains such a rapid rise. Retreat! Noah's shout echoed through the carnage of the battle that was taking place. Clank! One of the scorpion's claws clashed against Noah's sword. The impact sent him sliding backwards. Screech! Digging his sword into the sand below, Noah stopped his momentum, looking at the monster before him. Since the test had begun, Noah had decided to take it upon himself to rank his team in first place. He had left his team to deal with the bronze-ranked centipedes, while he himself engaged in battles with the silver cores. His team had suggested letting them assist him, but Noah denied the request. For him, fighting alone and winning was a way to reaffirm his confidence in his abilities. But as Noah glanced at the rankings, he was still confused by the scores. Kael's team was in third place, but despite killing the first monster, Kael's score hadn't increased from his original 2 points. Why wasn't he fighting? Did he think that these tests were below him? No, that couldn't be possible. After all, individual rankings were important to maintain overall rank in the academy. Was this Kael's way of looking down on them? Swoosh! Noah was brought out of his thoughts as wind blew at his sides. Turning his sword on instinct, it was met with the sharp claws of the dark black scorpion. It was a silver-2 monster, the same rank as Noah. Normally, he should have been able to defeat such a creature with relative ease, but the terrain was advantageous for the monster. The scorpion kept using the sand to hide its body from attacks that were truly threatening to its survival. As for the remaining attacks, they were deflected by those massive claws that seemed to have a life of their own. No matter which direction he attacked from, the claws would appear out of thin air and defend the scorpion's body. Even if by some chance Noah managed to bypass their defense, his momentum would be reduced, resulting in the force behind the sword being negated by the hard outer shell of the scorpion's main body. But Noah wasn't one to despair. Taking small breaths at equal intervals, he managed to calm the adrenaline in his body. The scorpion, after having its attack blocked, had retreated a few meters back, silently observing its enemy. Even though these monsters couldn't speak, they had sufficient intelligence to analyze the surroundings around them. Noah gripped his sword and charged again. 1, 2, right, left. One after the other, Noah's sword swung at angles that seemed inhumane but were easily managed by him. But the monster was equally fast. Its legs, or what appeared to be its legs, moved in quick succession, dodging one attack after the other. And the scorpion's claws weren't for show either. For every attack the monster dodged, one of its claws would return the favor with equal momentum. But Noah was just as fast as the monster, if not more. He not only used his eyes, but also predicted the monster's movements through its footwork. Yes, if it had been anyone else, they would have been shocked to see an individual deciphering the footwork of a monster. Noah was observing the minute details, including the angle at which the scorpion twisted its weight before going for an attack. Then, using that understanding, he predicted its next attack and thereby analyzed its entire movement pattern. It might have looked simple, but it was way too difficult. Though monsters had intelligence, it wasn't up to the mark to scheme against their enemies. So their general attack pattern was based on the instincts that had been honed by their bodies across the span of their lives. Using the same instincts, they randomly attacked their enemy. And due to their monster physique, running out of stamina was something that monsters barely suffered from. But this time it was facing an equally monstrous enemy, whose stamina never seemed to end. Noah was swinging a heavy broadsword like it was any other toy in the market. The sword changed its trajectory mid-swing, and was a huge shield for Noah to defend against the claws. But his problems never seemed to end. The scorpion had also started taking Noah seriously, as its huge tail kept launching strikes in a heartbeat. One moment, the monster might have been dodging an attack. The next moment, a claw struck Noah, and immediately the attack would be followed by the impending strike of the tail. As Noah jumped upon a monster's shell to strike its skull, the tail positioned itself high up in the air, and TSSSS, a dark purple liquid, was directed from its tail straight at Noah's face. Noah's eyes widened as he felt the liquid approaching him in slow motion. But coming back to his senses, Noah ducked down, avoiding it completely. The liquid landed on the monster's body, corroding its own shell. Though Noah's skills were top-notch, the recent save was more luck than actual skill. Noah had been caught off guard by the attack. The scorpion's body jerked in violent protest as the stinging pain registered in its brain. It began to rapidly move its body at unnatural angles, making Noah fall from its surface. Utilizing the stroke of luck, Noah charged towards its tail. This time the scorpion went all out, attacking with every part of its body. Be it its tail, claws, or those needle-like legs, Noah was bombarded by continuous assault. But Noah moved through the chaos with relative ease, his eyes focused on the tail. Noah jumped high up in the air, just before the tip of its tail. Gripping the sword, every muscle in his body being filled with mana, increased his strength. With a single brutal swing, Noah slashed open the tip of the tail, splitting the part in two. The venom inside the tip sprayed across the air. With equal speed, Noah pushed his leg against the remaining part of the tail that was still high up in the air and threw himself in the opposite direction of the monster. The venom landed on the scorpion's body, corroding more of its armor. The strategy was simple, but its implementation required guts that only someone like Noah had. As the shell corroded upon impact with the acid, Noah resumed his attacks. The scorpion didn't have much time left to live. Spurt. A deep gash appeared on the sidelines of the scorpion's body. Noah moved again, aiming to hit the main upper body, but before he could approach the monster, it turned its head downward and disappeared into the ground. Noah clicked his tongue in disappointment. The air had become muddy with sand particles flying high up due to the scorpion's disappearance into the sand. Noah jumped back to retreat from the cloudy air. He kept his guard up, sensing for any movements in the surrounding area. But the monster wasn't stupid to begin with. It had slowed down its speed in order to negate any vibrations made by its movements in the sand below. Noah closed his eyes and extended his mana sense across the area. With Noah's capabilities, he was able to use mana sense up to a certain distance. The area under his mana sense wasn't large, but it was enough to let him know of any enemies approaching him seconds prior to their arrival. But no matter how much Noah focused, he could not detect any unusual movements. Did it run away? Noah thought to himself. As Noah kept moving across the sand, trying to figure out the monster's location, another thought popped into his mind. Upon the instant realization, Noah's eyes widened as he dashed towards where his team members were supposed to be. Noah wanted to hunt more monsters in the silver rank, but given the average student strength, the academy had cleared the area of any strong monsters. So finding those in the silver rank was a tall task. Noah had to keep actively searching for the monsters. And during the fight, he had come quite far away from his teammates, who seemed to have moved their location in search of the centipedes. This desert had limited type of monsters, but each of them was a hassle to deal with. They were quite resilient to kill, and their ability to hide in the ground below was a huge disadvantage for the students. It was easier to fight a monster that could be seen than something that could appear at any moment from the ground below in order to devour you. Leaving aside the combat ability of the monsters, a sudden attack made it difficult to fight at your full capability. Noah had taken it as the academy's way to make the students learn to adapt to unfavorable situations. But on second thought, he believed that the test was brutal for the average bronze cores, who had to do everything in their capability to even damage the monsters before them, let alone dodge surprising attacks. Noah knew the general direction of his team, so he increased his speed to catch up to them. Maybe he was overthinking, but the monster had clearly seen the other students with him, and its instincts would have told it that all of them were weaker than Noah. After all, they were mere bronze cores, and that two average students and not the top elites in their core rank. Still, he hoped that they could at least save themselves from being eliminated. Noah wasn't worried about their safety, as the bracelet given by the academy had an inbuilt shield in it. But if the students got eliminated, then leaving aside being placed in the first rank, Noah's group might very well drop down to the lowest numbers, as every elimination reduced a percentage of the total score. Still, the situation wasn't out of hand, as Noah's group had gathered a good number of points. And even if by chance they were eliminated, Noah himself could simply kill more monsters to make up for the lost score. But Noah glanced at his bracelet again to look at the group ranking. With 70 points, their group was in first place but was soon followed by another group at 58 points. As for Kael's group, it was still in third place with 45 points. But this score didn't reassure Noah. Looking at Kael's name, he could see that there was no increase in points from the first kill. Why wasn't he fighting? Was there something else in the test? Noah didn't know since when, but he had actively begun to compare each of his achievements with Kael. Noah was someone who had always believed in his abilities and talent that, according to him, was the best in the history of the world. But meeting Kael, his pride had been damaged at every turn. What had begun as simple comparisons had now grown to become an inferiority complex for Noah. He didn't want to be behind anyone, and a noble at that. Though Noah wouldn't openly admit it, somewhere deep in his heart, he had begun seeing Kael as someone above him. And it hadn't even been more than 2 weeks since the academy began. Noah didn't like this feeling of defeat. No, it wasn't defeat, but acceptance that Noah hated. His acceptance of believing himself to be weaker than Kael. Maybe that was correct in the present, as Noah felt he was lagging behind Kael. But he couldn't simply accept it. In terms of pure ability, Kael might have been a little ahead of him, but if Noah used his ability, the Mana Sword, Noah didn't think Kael could defeat him. At least that was what his brain was telling him. But his soul was saying something else. Noah's instincts were always point on, and it was these instincts that were telling him that even if he fought Kael using the Mana Sword, he wouldn't win easily. Maybe he might not outright lose either. But Noah didn't want such feelings to fester in his heart. He wanted to have the absolute confidence that he had always carried since his childhood, at least since the time he had discovered his true capabilities. Noah let out a deep breath, as he could see his teammates some distance away. But as he looked closely, they didn't appear to be by themselves. There was another team standing beside them, talking casually as if this were an outing. As Noah approached closer, he could clearly see the lifeless body of the dead scorpion, which had run away from him. Its tail was cut at the tip, giving Noah the required hint. Seeing his teammates, Noah should have been happy, as none of them were eliminated. But in return, his expression darkened, for the very boy that he detested was currently standing above the scorpion's head, or at least what was left of it. From the looks of it, Kael had smashed the monster's head under his foot. Noah. Diana's voice brought the group's attention towards Noah. Kael raised his head to look at Noah, only to return his attention towards the dead body beneath him. I felt left out. Though it was my choice not to participate in the battles, my teammates seemed to have become flexible with each other. Their moves weren't coordinated, as that would take days if not months of effort. But their attacking styles had clearly adapted to each other. I didn't really feel a need to intervene. Still, I had to take care of my own personal rankings. Glancing at the scoreboard, I could see Noah at the top along with his group. They are quite fast. Diana, who now stood near me, said while looking into her own bracelet. Well, not them. Just him. Tilting her head, Diana looked up at me. Are you talking about Noah? I stared at her gray eyes, which seemed to reflect a world within. Royalty really had it different. Yes, that friend of yours. I answered while looking at Extro, who was trying to climb Big Guy's back. What was he trying to achieve? He isn't my friend, Diana said after a short pause, her voice barely audible, like it was something meant for me to hear. Is that so? I began to move towards the dead bodies of the centipedes lying around us. Diana didn't reply, but I could sense her discomfort. In the game, Diana hadn't met Kael till the final arc. That had led to her becoming closer to Noah due to their shared interests. And one thing led to another, with both of them getting engaged for political reasons. After all, a few years from now, Noah had become quite the big shot in the world. But when it was time for their fight against Kael, Diana hadn't hesitated to help Noah in the battle. Well, that was what the gaming community discussed online. I had never reached that part of the game, so I didn't know the exact details of all the things that had happened during and after Kael's death. The only confirmation that I had was that the current Diana didn't seem to have much hate towards me, or more specifically, towards the original Kael. I still had a decent chance to get closer to her. I crouched down to inspect the body of the centipede. I had an urge to absorb the mana essence from all these monsters, but I had restrained my desires. Leaving aside the fact that I had to kill the monsters with my own hands, I didn't think it was strategic to rank up at the moment. I was still the strongest in the academy, and it would take Noah some time before reaching my level. If I made full use of my abilities, I would be able to easily evolve my core into the gold rank, but I simply couldn't. Ranking up this fast would raise suspicions among the instructors. Even though the headmaster knew about my high mana control, there was no reason to let him learn more of my secrets. I had tasked Alfred with finding some solution to this problem. I wanted something that could hide my original rank from the eyes of other people. That way I could easily rank up while gradually showing an increase in my public rank. And that would help me better in differentiating my two identities as the student Kael and the head of DX. If my rank was the same as that of X, then it could lead to people connecting the dots between the two of us. Though there was only a slim chance for people to suspect me, I didn't want to leave any loose ends. So till the time Alfred designed some solution for my current predicament, I had to remain at the same rank. Maybe after some time, I could become a gold core. I know it would still sound unbelievable, but if I rank up after a month or two, people would at least attribute it to my monstrous talent and not some other hidden ability. Why did you keep giving me advice during the fight? Diana had again appeared beside me. As my other teammates were currently resting after being worn out from their continuous battles, we had some time to spare. Isn't it normal to correct something that's incorrect? I continued to stare at the corpse below me without raising my head. Diana just nodded at my words. For some reason, her voice felt upset. Did she want me to justify my behavior, or try to do something childish like the normal teenagers in love do? Well, I had no reason to. Though I consider myself a normal guy, I was in no way going to make her feel special right after my return in 3 whole years. People tend to lose interest in things that have already satisfied their curiosity. So I had to keep a part of her actively thinking about me. At least that was what those books on romance say. You daydream about the person you like. Honestly speaking, I had no reason to believe any of it, nor did I think all those love advices that I had read were any useful. But I had to start from something. Anything was always better than nothing. But somewhere, the logical part of my mind was telling me to shift my tactics. Even I didn't believe such dry conversations would lead to any fruitful outcome. Damn that Alfred. I had to do all these things only because of his foolish condition. Couldn't he be a bit more open about the terms of his request? But no. Only a Veltran Royal could help me in fulfilling my part of the deal with the madman. And it was Alicia's wish to get to know Noah better. Diana's soft voice reached me. Looking at her, I could see her eyes downcast while she was using her foot to play with the sand below, her hand behind her back. I take my words back. Though I had a low opinion about the instructions given in those books, I was sure that the way things were proceeding, I was doing it right. You rely on mana more than your own body. I kept my cool, as I had to now direct the conversation towards the meaningful part, towards what I needed out of the girl before me. What do you mean? Diana had a light frown across her face for the first time. Her eyebrows raised, with her mouth forming a slight pout. Maybe she didn't know what kind of expression she currently had, but it surely was a sight to see. Mana is something that is an integral part of our world. Not using it would be a foolish thing to do. But in the process of using mana, you have become too reliant on it and have neglected the basic physical endurance that your body needs. I moved towards Diana, standing just a few feet away. You expend mana in each attack, which might indeed give you more physical boosts in the short term. But if the battle becomes long-drawn, then your defeat would be the obvious result. Diana, for the entire time, had her eyes looking downward. The silence stretched between us before Diana looked up to stare into my eyes. You had always been good at giving advice to others. She chuckled lightly. Then, pausing for a moment, she adjusted the hair near her ear before looking sideways. Do you expect a princess to train in barbaric ways? Though it was meant to be a question, I didn't feel like answering it. I just shrugged my shoulder before heading towards my group. As if not expecting any answer either, Diana followed after me, walking in the footprints left by my feet. What was she doing? Will you teach me? Her soft feminine voice reached me. Depends. My answer was short. I didn't outright reject her offer, nor did I accept it. Though things were moving according to my wishes, wasn't this development too fast? Shouldn't she be more hesitant before engaging with me? Or had she always been waiting for this exact moment? What do you need in return, if I may ask? This time Diana's voice had more weight to it, as if she had now decided what she needed to do. I didn't answer immediately. I don't remember agreeing to teach you. So you don't want to? I never said that either. Huh. I felt a soft hand on my right wrist. Stopping in my tracks, I could see Extro looking at me. But my attention shifted towards the hand that had gripped my wrist. Wait a moment, please. Diana spoke with uncertainty in her voice. I stared at her hand a second longer before refocusing my gaze on her. As Diana looked back at me, her earlier confidence seemed to have shaken a bit. Sorry, I didn't mean to. She retracted her hand in haste. I didn't know why, But the moment her hand touched mine, I felt a strong sensation of revolt and disgust. The feeling came from the bottom of my soul and had nearly overwhelmed my mind. I had a strong urge to take the girl's head off her body, but I had managed to restrain myself. It was surprising for my body to create such a strong sense of discomfort at something. I had never experienced anything like this before. I just want to tell you that, please forget everything that had happened between us. I raised my brows in confusion, before quickly hiding my expression. What's she talking about? I might have resented you at first, but over the years, I had realized something. Diana continued, try not to look into my eyes. Wasn't that rude? Maybe what you did was a mistake on your part, but I dash. She stopped midway, her eyes widening in realization. Sorry, I didn't mean to say you were in the wrong. I mean, you were a little, but I am not blaming you for it. Diana tried to erase any misconceptions that might have been festering in my mind. Honestly, I didn't know what she was talking about, but I could deduce it was something related to her broken relationship with Kael in the past. I kept my expression neutral, waiting for her to complete whatever she was trying to achieve. Seeing that I had not said anything yet, Diana took a deep breath to calm her previously nervous state. I just wanted to say that you might have had your own reasons for what you did, and I had been impulsive in my reaction. I should have tried to understand your reasoning, but her voice broke at the end. As she raised her head, I could see slight tears forming at the corners of her eyes. But she didn't cry. Restraining her emotions, Diana kept looking into my eyes. I'm sorry for whatever had happened at that time, and I don't want our friendship to be broken because of that. Maybe I'm being selfish right now, but I just want things to go back to how they were. The last threads of restraint that Diana had were broken as her eyes became moist. Tears welled up in her eyes as she closed them in acceptance of defeat. I didn't know what had happened in the past. Though I had the general outline of the details, the specifics weren't shown in the game or in the memories that I had recovered so far. But this was a good development. My work had become even easier. I wanted to get closer to Diana by helping her with her combat expertise, but things took a better turn for me. Was this Lady Luck's way of favoring me? Maybe. I always have free time before dinner, so I paused as Diana's eyes flashed with hope. I could teach you during that time. It's not like I have to dedicate any extra effort. I generally train myself during that time frame, so maybe we could work something out. Diana's face brightened a little after hearing my words, but I could still sense some lingering hope in them. What else was she expecting me to say? Having said my part, I began walking towards my group again. Thank you. Diana gave a faint smile. After staring at me for what felt like eternity, she had finally muttered the words that I had been expecting. I just shrugged my shoulders. Diana didn't speak further, just smiling at my action. As I reached Extro, who was now sitting cross-legged, I sensed an unusual movement in the distance. I turned to look in the direction where I felt fluctuations in mana signatures. What is it? Vienna asked, turning to look in the direction I was staring. Not replying to her, I sprinted across the sand toward a group of students who were fighting what felt like a big scorpion. Mana sense was a technique that sent waves of mana from your core to the surroundings around you. These mana waves then crashed against the objects in the vicinity. After the initial clash, the waves would bounce back toward their host, thereby letting the individual scan his surroundings. This worked on both living as well as non-living things. Living beings had their own mana signature, which made it a little difficult for the mana waves to bounce back after coming into contact with foreign mana essence, as the mana signature of other beings indirectly destroyed those mana waves. So in order to overcome this problem, one had to have a sufficiently strong mana core. That was why only after reaching the platinum rank were individuals able to release mana waves that were strong enough to not get destroyed on their way back toward the main body. In the case of non-living objects, they too had mana in their foundational structures. But as it wasn't living mana, it was far easier to scout the general surroundings using mana sense than scanning for other living beings in your immediate vicinity. After deploying my own mana sense, I could clearly see the mana signature of a monster that appeared to have a scorpion's body shape. As for the rest, I could tell they were students from the academy. There was no need for me to save them. And if they were eliminated fighting the monster, it would be beneficial for my team in the end, as after getting closer to them, I could clearly tell that these people were part of Noah's team. Their names were given in the group rankings. Not that I knew each of them, but I had a general idea about the identities of one or two of them. Noah had always been good to all, and this kindness of his had always given him an edge over the other powerhouses in the world. At the end of the day, public opinion played a major part in one's rise in the world. So even though I wasn't the best guy out there, in my opinion, there was no harm in pretending to be a hero for once. But that wasn't the only reason for coming here. To make use of a guy like Noah, I had to manipulate the board in his own yard. There was no point in strategizing against Noah, as he was a protagonist. And there was a thing that the protagonist always made it out of any difficult situation. So instead of making Noah play in my game, I had to change the rules of his own game. It might sound complicated at first, but I had mapped out the general plan. The monster was clearly at Silver 2, and all these students were Bronze Core. Normally, they would have been eliminated within seconds, but the monster seemed to have been injured before. Its tail was split open, with the shell across its body releasing wisps of burning smoke. Probably the venom from the tail had destroyed its shell. The monster's movements were far sloppier than what they normally should have been. Sigh. These guys, they were quite lucky. I released my mana pressure while charging toward the monster. The monster, sensing my presence, paused mid-strike, and turned to look toward me. Well, it did look like the monster had paused to look at me, but the reality was that I had applied the mana pressure selectively over all the wounds across its body. That must have been painful for the scorpion, as I could clearly feel the rage in its eyes as it looked at me. I thought about taking out my sword, but then decided against it. I didn't know why, but I had this strong urge to kill this pest beneath me. Loosening my shoulders, I approached closer to the monster. The scorpion wasn't just standing either. It began to use its claws, or what had remained of them, to attack me. Its legs tried to circle around me in order to block my exit, not that I needed any escape. I didn't try to avoid its attack, but met its claw head-on while throwing out my own punch. Boom! The result being the scorpion's body was thrown away into the distance, sliding against the sand. That felt nice. The students were confused by the turn of events. I also sensed my teammates approaching closer. Leaving the students in their confusion, I dashed toward the monster again. It had barely managed to get itself up from the ground before I appeared beside its body and threw a punch just below its neck, closer to where its stomach should have been. Bam! Another hit, and the scorpion was launched into the air. I had expected it to fly even higher, but maybe its weight was too much. Within a second or two, it landed on the ground, its body barely able to move. Diana and the rest had already arrived, standing near Noah's teammates. None of them tried to interfere in the battle, not like they could. I gave them a brief glance, only to see their faces frozen in shock. Shifting my attention toward the monster, which was already on its last leg, I walked calmly in the direction of its body. I felt my heart beat, rising with each passing moment. I was excited. The brutality of battles always resulted in a dopamine release for me. The monster, seeing me approach, tried to lift its body from the ground, but failed miserably. With one casual jump, I landed on top of its back, with a monster's head just before me. Placing my right foot over its head, I applied a little pressure. Crack! I could hear its bones breaking under the pressure. The monster let out a roar of pain, which I largely ignored. I didn't outright kill it. Increasing the pressure with each passing second, more cracks began to appear across its head and just below the neck of the scorpion. Splat! The scorpion's head was smashed into the ground below, with blood splattering across the sand. The moment the creature took its last breath, I could sense its mana essence trying to enter my body. Naturally, I resisted the intrusion, though it was a bit difficult, as the mana essence of a creature at Silver 2 was more condensed and effective in ranking up. I felt a little regret over the lost resources, but there was no need to dwell over the matter any longer. Noah, Diana's soft voice broke my train of thought. I had already sensed the guy approaching closer. Looking up from the monster's corpse, I gazed at Noah for a moment before returning my attention to my wasted spoils of war. Sigh. I jumped down from the monster's body. Are you guys all right? Noah quickly appeared beside his teammates. Typical protagonist. With the inbuilt mana shields, there was no way for any of them to get hurt beyond repair. So what was the need for him to be so dramatic? Ignoring their talks, I extended my mana sense once again, scanning for more monsters in the desert. I felt like it was finally time for me to do some real work. Though I could sense the number of bronze core monsters was far higher than the silver ones, I wasn't disappointed. A silver-ranked monster might give an extra point compared to the bronze cores, but I wasn't one to discriminate. Treating everyone with equality was one of the supposed motives of my life. How have you been doing? HM. I turned to look back, only to see Noah chatting with Diana. If anyone saw Diana's pristine appearance, none would say that she had been in any battle at all. But Noah, for the hero he was, had to ask about her well-being. Diana just smiled back in return. Kids. Just as I was about to shift my gaze, Noah looked in my direction. His eyes met mine. There was a long pause before Noah waved his hand at me. I just nodded in return, but the guy began to move towards me. I had the thought of ignoring him, but that would make me look like the bad guy. I stood in my place, my gaze fixed on Noah, who was taking his time to reach me. I heard what you did there. Noah had a big smile across his face. You didn't have to save them, but you still took the effort. I must thank you for it. Scratching the back of his head, Noah let out a light, awkward chuckle. I didn't add anything to his statements, which were filled with positivity to no end. Seeing my non-expressive face, Noah's smile wavered a bit. Did I say something wrong? Noah asked with genuine curiosity in his voice. They would have been eliminated had I not saved them. I answered after a brief moment of silence between us. Yeah, I get that. And thank you for SA-. There was no point in weakening an already weak team. I interrupted him. Noah's expression froze at my words. What do you dash? There has to be at least some equal competition between the students. Had I not intervened, the second-ranked team would have placed first without doing much. That would have defeated the aim behind these tests. My voice was even as I spouted some very logical words. Noah's eyes widened slightly at my words. You mean you wanted to see a proper competition between the first and second-ranked teams, without either side getting a decisive advantage? I nodded at his words. Noah's previously bright expression turned darker, though he quickly managed to hide it. Do you enjoy watching fights between others? I mean, don't you want a team to rank higher? I tilted my head slightly at his question. Did he seriously think we were in third place based on those rankings? All the best. I gave Noah a polite goodbye before getting back to my business. It was time for me to get serious. Closing my eyes, I placed my right foot at the back and swoosh. I was ready to hunt. The students are performing better than expected. Yes, I think we should give more attention to these students among the commoners. Hey, what do you think of adding this to the curriculum? The instructors assigned for the first year were currently in a room filled with smart displays on all sides. Each of the screens before them displayed live footage of all the students who were currently fighting in the designated area. The rankings below the top 3 were constantly fluctuating, with some teams getting a lead over the others. The back and forth between the various teams continued for the entirety of the time. As for the top 3, there had been no change in their rankings since the start. Though each of them was gaining points with constant momentum, there was no change in the overall ranks. The surprising part was that the group which was supposed to be at the top had stayed in third place without climbing up. Though it was the duty of the instructors to analyze the battles of every student, currently all of them had their subconscious attention toward a certain group. Since making the first kill, Kael hadn't killed a single monster and had just let his teammates do the rest. He was still guiding them when needed, but never interfered in any of the battles. Was he being arrogant? That was the thought in everyone's head, until Kael had dashed toward a certain area where a group of bronze cores were desperately trying not to get eliminated by the silver-ranked beast before them. The beast might have been injured. Still, it was a silver 2 monster and not some random pest. Kael had not just killed it, but had done it so effortlessly that it made even the instructors doubt the monster's strength. And Kael's way of killing the beast wasn't exactly the most memorable thing to see. The instructors weren't the only ones in the room. As the Academy's supreme student body, it was the responsibility of the Student Council to help instructors manage all activities arranged for the students that I had come far away from the main area of the test. Scanning my surroundings, I could sense several monsters buried in the sand beneath. They weren't showing much movement and were themselves trying to search for new prey. Thinking for a moment, I felt bad about these beasts being turned into points for me. The reason I had left my team behind was to protect them from being eliminated in the chaos that would soon follow. They were strong, but not strong enough to keep up with me. I took a deep breath, stabilizing my mind from any unnecessary thoughts. Willing my mana core, I made each of the muscle fibers in my body thoroughly filled with mana. I had specifically directed more of my mana reserves into my right hand. Flexing my muscles, I aimed my fist at the ground below. Bam! The land around me shook with impact. If vibrations were what attracted these monsters, then I was going to do everything in my power to create the greatest vibrations they might have ever felt. Bam! 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 One after another, I began drilling a valley of punches into the sand below me. Even though the ground was covered in sand, I could feel cracks appearing across its surface. And I could feel them. Each monster around me was doing its best to reach me before its counterparts. I could feel several predatory gazes locked onto me. A small smirk unknowingly formed on the corner of my lips. I didn't stop. Using more of my mana reserves, I bombarded the ground with punches in quick succession. Feeling movement below me, I stopped for a second before jumping sideways. A centipede's mouth had emerged from below, and it wasn't the only one, as more monsters began to show themselves from their supposed hideouts. Licking my lips, I took the sword from my storage before swinging it in an abrupt motion. The friction created against the air made the sand particles around me fly high up in the air. Before the cloud of dust around me could settle down, I had already moved. Spurt! With a single decisive swing, the centipede that had attacked me at first was cut down into 2 halves, with its blood spilling onto the sand around. I wasn't holding back. Each of my attacks was backed up by mana, making them far more lethal and swift in their kills. My bracelet buzzed once, letting me know the points credited to my name. Before the other centipedes could understand anything, I moved again. I appeared beside the centipede with a disfigured mouth. Raising my sword, I aimed at its head before bringing the blade down. Spurt! Another down. Feeling movement behind me, I jumped to my left, only to dodge a claw that was directed at me. Looking at the source of the attack, my lips curved up to form a thin smile. They had finally arrived. I could sense several silver-ranked monsters approaching closer to me. I paused for a second longer before focusing my attention on the scorpion. It was slightly bigger than the previous one that I had killed earlier. Probably at silver 3. No, it felt like it was at the peak of the rank, a step away from evolving into a gold core. The monster, not caring for my thoughts, charged at me. In a heartbeat, its body was a foot away from mine. 2 of its claws were aimed at my chest, while its tail positioned itself high enough to shoot its venom at me. Bringing my sword up, I deflected the first claw while jumping on the second one. My movements were fast, but so was the monster. It immediately used one of its legs at an unnatural angle and directed it at the claw I was standing on in order to shake me off. But I wasn't playing around either. Running across the surface of its claw, I made my way towards its head. Slicing it off would end the job. Or that was what I thought before jumping away from the monster's body. A highly concentrated venom was sprayed in my direction. Though I kept changing my position with every second, the venom followed my path. It seemed infinite, as the monster didn't stop. Even the venom that had spilled on its body didn't do anything to damage the monster in any real way. Being at the peak of silver rank, and on the way to evolving into the next rank, had made its shell more durable and sturdy. I could see smoke rising from the points of contact of the venom on its shell, but the monster was unharmed. Along with the venom spray, its claws had gotten back in motion, directing one attack after the other. Each time I dodged an attack, a small crater would form in the sand below. Those claws, they felt stronger than even the hardest metals. Powered up by the beast's mana, The claws had become deadlier and faster, as the momentum of the attacks kept on increasing. Clank! My sword bounced back as it clashed against one of the claws, before I briefly evaded another attack. It did damage the monster's claw, as a big crack spread across its surface. But the scorpion wasn't alone. The centipedes from earlier kept on emerging from the ground below, every time I dodged any of the scorpion's attacks. I kicked a centipede in its stomach that had launched itself high up in the air. Its body burst open under the impact. Before I could land below, other centipedes had similarly jumped at me. Using my body, I attacked them in return, while my sword kept on fighting against the scorpion. The multitasking was taking more of my effort, but it wasn't like I was overwhelmed. After all, I had expected something like this to happen. Swoosh! I felt a wave of wind, as more scorpions had appeared beside me. Ranging from Silver 1 to Silver 3, all of them were stronger and faster than the centipedes. In addition, they had numerous weapons at their disposal, as opposed to the mouths used by the worms. I willed more of my mana through the muscles in my leg, resulting in an explosive increase in my speed. My mana control allowed me to use my mana reserves in the most efficient way, without draining them in long-drawn battles. Dodging the combined assault against me, I beheaded a Silver 1 beast that was just below me as I was suspended in the air while trying to evade the attacks from all directions. The party had just begun. Landing on the ground, I rolled forward to avoid another centipede that had just appeared below me. I had to commend the monster for its agility, despite being a mere bronze core. In a return motion, I twisted my body, grabbing the thick shell of the centipede before slamming it into the ground. Thud! Using its dead body as support, I turned my body upside down before spinning my legs in a circular motion. The other bronze-ranked centipedes that had circled me were thrown away upon contact with my legs. At least most of them were. A dark-colored centipede had withstood my attack and was now adjacent to the ground, aiming to engulf me from the side. Pushing myself against the ground, I propelled my body high up into the air before twisting it to defend against the incoming mouth. Clank! My sword brushed against the centipede's teeth, sending vibrations through my body. This was the first silver-ranked centipede that I had fought. Instead of being disappointed, I used the reverse momentum to retreat backward before charging at the scorpions that were waiting to attack me. In a battle against superior numbers, focusing on a single opponent was a guaranteed way to die. One had to constantly keep changing positions so as not to get overwhelmed under a series of attacks. The number of scorpions was far less than the centipedes, but each of them was a hassle to deal with. With their insane agility, combined with those sharp claws, numerous legs, and venom-spitting tails, I had to divert nearly 50% of my attention so as not to get caught and pincered beneath their bodies. Clank! Another of my swings was deflected by the peak silver monster, but not without having its own claw cut into two halves. It was the same scorpion that had attacked me at first. Losing one of its claws, it gave a pained roar before charging at me again in its frenzy. But I'd already shifted my attention to the early silver cores around me. More monsters were attracted toward me as the vibrations of our battle reached even wider areas than before. My sword didn't stop its judgment as I danced through the wall of monsters around me. Spurt! 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 The monsters at Silver 1 were strong, but their shells weren't strong enough to defend against my strikes. With each swing, another head flew, bodies piling up one after the other. I could feel various different types of mana essence trying to enter my body. Each time, I resisted the urge to absorb them. Though now my mana control was fairly good, resisting the temptation to absorb mana essence was more difficult, as my body craved the sensation of pleasure that accompanied the absorption. But I had enough control over my mind not to let things like that become a hindrance to my goals. Aiming my sword at one of the claws of a scorpion, I tensed my muscles for the strike. Bam! Arg! A silver-ranked centipede had emerged from my blind spot, crashing into my body as I was thrown across the sand. The damage done wasn't much, as my regeneration took over. But the attack hit my ego. Damn that pest. I quickly picked myself up from the ground, searching for the offender. There it was with its mouth facing the sky, roaring in what felt like an act of satisfaction. Was it trying to flex? Digging my foot into the sand below, I accelerated toward it. Closing the distance between us, I appeared before the centipede within seconds and aimed my fist at its mouth, which seemed to be insulting me. Crack! Boom! Its skull or whatever was cracked under the impact of my punch. The monster slid a few meters back, but it wasn't dead. Looking at my hand, I could see some of the bones on the outer side deformed due to the punch. Though the injury began to heal, the pain from getting your bones crushed was the real deal. Before I could focus on it again, other centipedes began to gang up on me. Sigh. I needed to take care of these small fries first. They couldn't do any real damage to me, but their presence was becoming a constant hindrance. I closed my eyes for a brief moment that lasted less than a second before opening them again. Silence. All the monsters in my vicinity paused their movements, as for the first time in a while, I had released the full might of my mana pressure. The monsters at the bronze core kneeled at first before bursting like balloons under the pressure created by my mana core. I could have used the mana pressure much earlier, but I wanted to experience fighting large numbers, though the idea proved to be a little difficult to execute. It had been quite some time since the test had begun, and I had a feeling that the time for the practical session would conclude soon. I didn't glance at my bracelet, instead focusing my attention on willing more of my mana reserves to intensify the pressure around me. In about 5 to 10 seconds, nearly all of the bronze cores were dead, their bodies lifeless on the ground below. As for the silver-ranked beasts, those at Silver 1 had sustained injuries that had brought them to death's door, a step away from their actual death. As for those at Silver 2 and the peak of the silver rank, the bastards had managed to survive, though all of them were pinned to the ground, unable to show much movement. But that didn't last long, as the peak silver cores quickly adapted to the situation and amplified the mana supply to each cell in their bodies. The result was another combined charge at me, but this time, the numbers were nearly negligible. Ignoring the charging monsters, I first dashed toward the early silver cores, relieving those pitiful creatures of their pathetic lives. Spurt, spurt, spurt. Wasting no time, each of my strikes ended a monster's life. My mana pressure had already crushed their hard shells, resulting in my blade slicing through their bodies easily. My bracelet kept buzzing with every kill. 1, 2, 3. One after the other, bodies fell apart. Within a few seconds, nearly all of the early silver cores were dead. Swoosh! With a swift motion, I appeared beside the peak silver monsters that were moving through the chaos, trying to locate me. Aiming for one of the scorpion's underbelly, I swung my sword, leaving a deep gash across its stomach. The monster, even after having its belly sliced, couldn't react in time, as I was constantly releasing my mana pressure. Even though the monsters at Silver 3 were able to move under the effect of my mana pressure, their movements and reflexes were far slower than their original level. Without waiting for the monster to make a move, I jumped across its body, piercing my sword through its neck on my way around. Thud! Its lifeless body fell to the ground. I moved again. This time, I was aiming to eliminate the silver-ranked centipede that had clashed with me moments prior to releasing my mana pressure. Looking at it, I could see the centipede trying to make a movement, but was unable to move its body. Unlike the scorpions, it didn't have the advantage of a well-built body. The monster relied mainly on diving into the sand to move through the desert. Before my thoughts could end, I was already before the centipede's body, my sword directly aimed at its skull. Though the skull was the hardest part to damage, I had a strong urge to dominate this bastard. The centipede seemed to have sensed my presence at the last moment, but it was too late. My sword had pierced through its head. Standing atop its body, I applied more pressure to move the sword deeper into its skull, my muscles flexing under the strain. The centipede shook its head in pain, or at least it tried to. As I was directly above its body, the mana pressure on the centipede had increased by several times. It could no longer make any effective movements. Taking my time, I tried my best to give the monster a painful death, but its luck seemed to have shined. The centipede's body lost all of its vitality as my sword drained the monster's life. The other mid and peak silver monsters had now adapted to my mana pressure. Their movements no longer felt as sluggish as before. Still, their speed was far inferior to their peak power. I sat on the centipede's dead body for a moment to take a look across the entire area. Wherever my gaze moved, all I could see were corpses of the dead. The scent of blood had filled the entire surroundings, and even the sand had turned shade of red. Sigh. One moment I was over a dead body, and the next. Spurt. A Silver 2 scorpion found its head detached from its body. The carnage had begun again. Swoosh. Clank. Boom. Spurt. One after the other, I kept exchanging a series of attacks with the peak silver monsters, while killing the ones at Silver 2 with ease. The number of monsters had now dwindled significantly. There were merely a few monsters left, all of them being at the peak of the silver rank. Swinging my sword in a circular arc, blood sprayed from across the blade's surface. The scorpions were now wary. None of them charged at me. Instead, they began to circle around me, keeping their distance, waiting for one of their own to start the attack. Honestly, I found the situation a little amusing. I had been killing their comrades since the start, but it was only now, after most of them had been killed, that the rest of these monsters were showing some signs of fear toward me. Though I had begun to enjoy the situation, time wasn't on my side. I had to wrap this up real quick. I wasn't worried about my rank, as my team was guaranteed to place first on the scoreboard. Still, leaving unfinished business left a bitter taste in my mouth. As I took my first step, the monsters tensed around me. But at the end of the day, all of them were beasts, and it was their primary instinct to devour anything other than themselves. I moved toward the nearest one. The monster, seemingly prepared for my attack, raised both its claws in a single fluid motion while charging at me at the same time. I met its attack head-on, or at least pretended to. Lightly touching the surface of its claws, I jumped over its body, directly positioning myself just before the scorpion's tail. Before it could spray its venom, I twisted my body downward, thrusting my sword into the creature's back. It shook its body in agony before standing on its legs. Losing my balance, I caught onto the hard shell of the monster's body, but that might have been a poor decision, as the creature's tail came hammering down on me. Clank! I managed to deflect the attack with my sword, but the momentum threw me away from the monster. Landing on the ground, 6 more pairs of claws were directed at me. Making a roll, I approached the injured monster again before piercing my sword from below its neck. Not expecting an immediate attack, the scorpion couldn't defend itself and lost its life in the process. Though I was fairly stronger than these monsters, even while being at the same rank, a slight mismatch in my actions could lead me to losing my advantage. After all, the monsters had bigger bodies than me, so clearly their area of attack was much larger than mine. Swoosh! My kill was followed by a rapid charge toward the circling monsters, who were trying their best to keep up with my movements. Spurt. Another down. The monsters were now reduced to a mere 3 of their original count. Huh. I took a deep breath to let my nerves relax. At the same time, I withdrew my mana pressure. Keeping it active for so long had taken a toll on my mana reserves. The rate at which my body was trying to absorb the mana from the surroundings was clearly lagging behind my mana expenditure. The moment I stopped releasing my mana pressure, I could feel my reserves replenishing at a faster pace than before. Clank! I had instinctively raised my sword to block an incoming claw. Looking around, I could see all 3 monsters upon me. Sidestepping, I avoided being encircled, while at the same time appearing beside one of the scorpion's legs. With a swift motion, I cut 2 of its massive legs, making the creature lose its balance. Before I could attack further, the other 2 beasts aimed their claws at me. Their speed was now faster than before. I avoided their attacks by a hair's margin before reciprocating with mine. I could see a monster having one of its claws missing. It was the same dark-colored scorpion that had attacked me at first. As I focused my attention on the scorpion, I could sense the mana in its body raging violently. With my limited rank, I wasn't able to peer deeply and could only get a superficial view of its mana meridians. Spurt. My thoughts had never stopped my movements. My blade was already upon the neck of the scorpion, whose legs had been cut. With its body unbalanced, the monster couldn't keep up with my movements. The result being its head rolling on the sand, blood spraying in a wide arc. 2 left. I moved towards the monster with the missing claw, as it was the easier target of the 2. But the creature had fast reflexes. It had already sensed my movements, and with my mana pressure no longer hindering the monster's speed, the scorpion attacked me with its tail and the remaining claw at the same time. Its attack was fast, but predictable. That was the only advantage while fighting monsters at the lower level. Their brains weren't strong enough to fight using strategies, so their attacks followed a single set pattern. Dodging the attack, I approached the monster's main body, slashing my sword through its sides. As I ran with my sword embedded in its body, the scorpion gave a thunderous roar as its body was torn apart from the sides. Though my attack left a huge gash across its body, it wasn't deep enough to end the monster's life. Still seeing that the scorpion was out of combat for a while, I focused my attention on the other monster, whose legs were above my head, moments away from crushing me. I stomped the ground below to propel my body high up in the air before twisting midair, my blade moving in a refined arc as the legs that had been buried in the sand, while attacking me, were cut in their respective halves. As the scorpion's momentum had been disturbed, I took advantage of its liability, dashing straight at its head. With a slight jump, I was already upon the creature's body, and with a powerful swing, my blade met the hard shell of its neck. Spurt. Thud. The scorpion's lifeless body made contact with the ground below. Huh. Letting out a shallow breath, I turned my head, looking towards the last of my prey. Huh. The scorpion was currently flat on the ground, its tail, along with the remaining claw, suspended in the air. It was an abnormal thing to see. It looked like the scorpion was writhing in pain, but at the same time, it didn't feel like that. It was closer to a pain derived from pleasure. Observing in silence, I didn't stop the monster from its ongoing activity. I tried to sense the flow of mana in its body, only to find the already volatile mana moving in destructive waves across its meridians. The mana was crashing against the monster's core, or that was what I sensed. My assumptions could be wrong, as I wasn't strong enough to dissect its entire mechanics of mana. A minute had already passed with the monster's body frozen in the same position. Seeing no result, I moved to end the creature's life, only to stop in my tracks. I could sense the mana in my surroundings rapidly moving towards the monster. The effect wasn't strong, but it was enough for my understanding. The monster was undergoing an evolution. The same thing had happened when I ranked up, just on a much larger scale. It was common knowledge that monsters could evolve too. After all, the first one to evolve in order to become a sovereign was none other than a monster. But I had never seen any monster evolving before me, at least not until now. Monsters had it easier, as they could increase their ranks by consuming other creatures like humans, elves, vampires, and so on. They could also cultivate subconsciously, similar to how other intelligent races cultivate, by absorbing the mana in the surroundings after tiring out their bodies in combat. Just the difference being that monsters did it without thinking, as it was second nature to them. Something that had been imprinted in their biology, the same as breathing without active effort. I could feel slight vibrations in the mana particles around me. Looking at the monster, I knew that in its current state, it was the most vulnerable to kill. The most logical decision was to kill it before it could evolve. Even the time remaining for the test to end was drawing closer. But I wanted to fight it. I had never fought a gold-ranked beast before. Though I had a strong urge to do so, Arthur had advised me against overstraining my body without having any real gains. Yes, I had stopped absorbing the mana essence from the monsters that I killed. There was no point in fighting a stronger beast. I had thought it would be a good experience, but Arthur insisted on battling higher ranks only after becoming a gold core. He might have been right, but right now, looking at the beast before me, I couldn't help but ignore his advice. Logically, even if the monster evolved, I doubted it would be much stronger compared to the other gold cores, as there was no time for the monster to get used to its new strength. And seeing its missing claw, I doubted whether it could grow back. So going by the facts, this monster would be weaker than the average gold cores. Huh. I had found the justification for my actions. And even if by some chance the monster overpowered me, I knew the instructors would appear at the right moment to save me. After all, this was a gold-ranked beast in a test meant for bronze and early silver ranks. I could blame it on the academy, even if I was eliminated by the activation of the inbuilt shield in the bracelet. I didn't have to wait long. As the monster roared with all its might, I could see visible changes appearing across its body. The outer shell of the monster had begun to crack open. Bit by bit, the monster had loosened every part of the shell. As the inner body of the monster was now in view, I could see the skin of the creature bulging in several parts. Within seconds, huge protrusions had formed across its body, and then, all of them burst open like balloons. The sand around the creature turned red, as blood was sprayed from the blast. Heat waves began to rise from the scorpion's body, with its body parts tearing apart. Yes, I found the situation quite gross. Every part of the monster's body was being torn apart, and more blood seeped out from the cracks. Even the intestines of the beast were visible from the area around its belly. The process continued for some time, before the monster started to bulge once again. This time, the entire body of the creature began to inflate like it was being filled with air from within. As seconds passed, the scorpion had now become twice its original size. Not that I could differentiate it, as the body of the beast was no longer visible. In its place, all I could see was a huge balloon-like structure with barely visible body parts. I could tell where this was going. Within a few moments, the balloon tore open violently, resulting in another shower of blood across the area. I retreated a few steps so as to avoid ruining my clothes. As the dust settled in, I could see the figure of the scorpion. Its previously dark skin had become darker, with every part of its body having increased in size from its original version. I could see one of its claws had now become broader and stronger than before. There was no need for me to analyze its condition, as one look was enough for anyone to tell the difference. And as expected, the monster still lacked its other claw that I had cut during our fight. Not only had the monster's size increased, but so had its presence. Even the passive presence emitted by the scorpion was far denser than the active pressure that it was always trying to project during the battle. Silence. The mana particles around me began to vibrate again as the scorpion was getting ready to kill me. I could feel the rage in the creature's eyes, along with the murderous intent that it was releasing by clicking its claw. Was this guy getting delusional? Why in the hell was it giving typical protagonist vibes? It couldn't be some hero among their tribe. Suddenly, I had a bad feeling about the development of events. The mana particles had stopped vibrating, as the evolution had been completed. But, silence. The monster didn't move, neither did I. I gripped the sword in my hand, loosening my shoulders for the inevitable clash. My heart had begun to beat faster than ever before. I could feel the adrenaline pumping through my veins. Seeing that the monster made no move, I took it upon myself to initiate the combat. As I walked calmly over the sand, heading towards the monster, it didn't show any visible reaction. If previously it was wild, now all I could see was a calculative calm in its eyes. I stood about 6 feet away from the scorpion, its tall body looming like a mountain before me. Swoosh! In a heartbeat, I was before the monster, my blade falling upon its head. Clank! With its single claw, the monster easily stopped my attack. Expecting such a thing, bam! Before I could follow up, the monster's other claw, which was missing its pincer, had crashed into my stomach. The claw didn't have its pincers, but the bone had done its deal. My eyes had followed the movement, but my body couldn't keep up with my train of thought. Without being able to defend, I was flung across the sand, my body bouncing like a ball. The force behind the attack was far greater than my expectations. Cough! Cough! I coughed as blood spilled from my mouth. My intestines felt like they had been turned upside down. Were all gold cores this strong? I couldn't believe it. I knew that, as one ranked up, there was a quantitative and qualitative change in their mana core, as well as their application of mana. But wasn't this too much a difference? Was it because the monster had evolved mid-fight? This guy, is the bastard some once-in-a-generational talent? Attributing the monster's insane strength to its uniqueness, I massaged my neck once to gain some sort of mental control over the situation, but I willed my regenerative abilities to heal the internal damage to my stomach. I had to fight more carefully. Though my regeneration could heal almost anything, that didn't mean I could use it openly before the instructors, who I was sure were currently watching my fight. Healing minor damage could be attributed to some spell that I knew, but such instant regeneration would definitely raise suspicions. The scorpion had not moved a single inch from its place. It was as if the creature was taunting me to attack. Bending slightly, I sprinted towards the monster. Once again I appeared before the scorpion, this time aiming for its claw, but before I could strike. Swoosh! The creature had disappeared from my view. Boom! The pincers smashed into my sides, throwing me like a rag doll. It felt like the monster had teleported beside me. This time, not even my eyes could track its movements, let alone my body. The only saving grace was that the battle had taken place in a desert. There were no obstacles for me to crash into, which largely reduced the damage that I could have sustained. Still, the impact sent pain shooting across my entire body. I couldn't think straight, as a loud ringing echoed in my ears. Cough! Cough! More blood spilled from my mouth. I willed my body to somehow stand up again. As I stood on my legs, my body swayed a little before my vision began to narrow. I felt a strong sense of repulsion from the bottom of my soul. I wanted to kill this pest. I wanted it to scream in agony. The scorpion's thunderous roar reached my ears. Turning to look towards it, I could see the creature burning through my vision that was growing narrower by every second. Student Kael, the test has ended. You may return to the teleportation passage. Hearing a familiar feminine voice, I turned to look in its direction, only to find a red-haired woman standing tall before the burning scorpion. Elsa glanced at me once before disappearing from the scene. The scorpion's roar had died down as its body was turned to ashes. With a sudden deep breath, I felt my vision returning. My mind had calmed down from the previous chaos. I had thought I could defeat the monster, but seeing Elsa kill it with such ease made the reality clear. I may have been able to kill it using all my abilities, but I was still weaker than a gold core. And if my instincts were right, this monster wasn't an ordinary one. I tried to placate my broken ego, which had sustained a bit of damage. Sigh, I guess it's time to head back. This is madness. He needs to be stopped. What the hell is that kid thinking? There was a buzz in the area where the instructors were keeping an eye on the students through the screens before them. Though the instructors have been assigned selected students to observe, currently the entire staff had their eyes glued to a single screen. On the display, Kael could be seen standing close to the scorpion that had evolved into the gold rank. The instructors had been observing the entire exchange since Kael had begun punching the ground to attract more monsters. At first they were impressed by his skills, and then they were shocked by his utter domination. The moment Kael released his mana pressure, it was as if the entire table had been turned upside down. With ease, Kael had taken care of most of the monsters, with just a few peak silver scorpions still alive. One after the other, even those creatures fell to his blade, until only one injured scorpion was left alive. But then the events took a drastic turn, and the scorpion evolved to become a gold core. The experienced instructors could tell that the scorpion was a lot stronger than the average gold core. Even at gold 1, it radiated a presence that only something at gold 2 or the latter tiers could. Many wanted to intervene, but were stopped by Elsa Senior. Being one of the most senior instructors in the academy, Elsa's words carried their own weight. So everyone waited. The first clash resulted in Kael being thrown away. Just seeing the impact from the attack, the instructors felt Kael was dead. But the kid stood up seemingly unharmed and charged again. But after the first 2 attacks, Elsa disappeared from the room. She had first thought that Kael could win, but maybe she had overestimated him a lot. Even surviving a single attack from something an entire rank above him was a feat in itself. Appearing before the monster, just as Elsa was preparing to destroy it, her eyes widened. Reflexively, she readied herself for a fight, only to notice no imminent threat in her surroundings. Scanning the area, the only one in her vicinity was Kael. His body was swaying from time to time. His eyes, Elsa felt they were turning a deeper shade of black. Ignoring the sensation from her instincts, she used one of her spells to kill the scorpion with ease. Only when the creature was on the verge of death did Elsa feel the invisible threat disappearing. Student Kael, the test has ended. You may return to the teleportation passage. Saying her part, Elsa glanced at Kael briefly, only to find his eyes returning to their original state. Though she found the situation strange, Elsa had other work to do. The test was concluded, and now she had to ensure the safe retreat of the students. As for Kael, she believed he was capable enough of returning on his own. Rubbing the back of her neck, Elsa disappeared from the scene. The monster had now turned to ashes. Storing his sword, Kael began to return to the teleportation area. As he had come far off to fight the monsters, there was a long way for him to return on time. Reaching the teleportation passage, I could see students standing with their respective groups. Almost everyone seemed to have arrived. Maybe I was the last one. The moment I stepped inside the area, one by one, I could feel each student's gaze on me. The reason was pretty obvious. My team was placed in the first position with a score of 324 points. Out of them, my own individual score was around 228 points. The rest were scored by my team. In second place was Noah's team with 156 points, and in last place was some team with 120 points. My group was far ahead of the others. Ignoring their gazes, I headed towards a particular boy with brown hair and equally similar eyes. As I approached him, the nearby students went silent. None dared to make any movement. Even the students speaking with John had stiffened under my presence. Did the people here have a hobby for dramatics? It wasn't like I was some psychopath, walking around to kill everyone. John, sensing the change in atmosphere, turned to look behind. "Oh, Kael, damn, you scored a big hit, huh?" As energetic as ever. Looking around, I could see that John had managed to make some friends. I just nodded at his words, waiting for the teleportation to begin. The students nearby had stopped all of their earlier discussions, not daring to utter another word. "Guys, you don't have to be this scared. Kael's a cool guy," John said while placing his hand over my shoulder. I could have put him in his place, but decided against it. There was no real benefit in presenting myself as some arrogant noble brat. Taking my silence as confirmation, I could see the students letting out breaths of relief. In moments, most of them had returned to their previous topics of discussion. Clap, clap. Is everyone here? An instructor clapped his hands to gather the attention of the students. Once he cross-checked the numbers with the student list, the instructor seemed to have notified the personnel controlling the passage. One moment we were in the desert, and the next, the mighty walls of the academy were the first to greet us. Congratulations on completing your practical. An elderly instructor was the first one to speak. All the instructors are quite happy with your performance. So, as a gesture of appreciation, a dinner has been arranged for all of you. Finally, damn, I was hungry as hell. Hey, but will it be the same? Are you stupid? Why would they give the everyday food if today is meant to be special? Isn't that common sense? Is it? The usual bickering of the students continued, with many of them cheering for themselves. After all, this must have been the first time for most of the students to actually kill a monster with their own hands and without any support from their guardians. A new experience for many. Some of the students cheered, while others were simply happy for the conclusion of their grueling day. As the instructors stepped back, the students began to move towards their own rooms to get refreshed before the dinner planned for them. John walked along with me. What was your score? I was curious about it. John raised his index finger. 1. How could someone score? 10, Kael. Do you think so low of me? John raised his voice in defense. I mean, I kind of expected him to be unable to kill a single beast. But maybe I was underestimating the poor guy. I mean, I can't exactly blame you. The monsters were tough to beat. For all the time given, we were barely able to kill 5 of them. Huh? Were you? Was he talking about him? Me? Huh. You were funny, man. My team killed 5 of them. What? And your individual score? John thought for a moment. Was it something difficult to remember? Doesn't my team's score count as mine? I mean, I had played a key role in killing the beasts. John raised his hands in a fist of victory. I just kept looking at him. My gaze seemed to have made him uncomfortable. John tried to ignore my stare, but he had no one else to change the flow of conversation. Z0. I moved closer to him. All right, I didn't kill a single one, but I had managed to dash. Outpacing John, I moved towards my room. Sigh. It was my mistake for overestimating him. So much for wielding spears. Kael, you thought something bad, right? Hate dash. Click. I shut the door behind me. My room was as silent as ever. I had never been one to store unnecessary things, as could be seen from the current state of my room. Except for the furniture provided by the academy, there wasn't a single item that I had added to my residence. I like keeping things simple. Looking in the mirror, I looked crazy. My clothes were stained with the monster's blood, and even my face was messy. But the more I looked, the better I felt. Even in my messy appearance, I looked kind of cool. I need to take a shower. Moving toward the shower, I removed my clothes, the hot water falling over my body. I felt my entire fatigue wash away with the droplets of water. At least the mental fatigue. I wasn't injured physically, as my regeneration had taken care of all the damage. I let my hair soak under the warm rain, my eyes closed, as I remembered the day's events. Honestly speaking, it was fun. Hunting monsters had always been one of my favorite things to do. The feel of slicing your blade through their muscles. The pained roars that follow soon after everything was a huge dopamine releaser for me. Even after such a heavy battle, my body was craving more. There was a different pleasure in ending a creature's life. Their bodies falling lifelessly on the ground with that melodious thud. I want to rank up badly. I had this strong urge to fight stronger opponents. Surely the pleasure derived from them would be exhilarating. Sigh. The entire cafeteria was crowded, as students rushed to fill their plates. I had been lucky to arrive earlier. The seating arrangement was simple, with long tables spread out throughout the dining hall. Taking my plate, I made my way towards the end of the hall. As the students were still trying to get their plates, the table was empty. I took a seat at the right corner, adjacent to the wall, leaving a chair empty on my right. I like sitting in quiet places, not attaching myself to the walls. The students would mostly occupy the other tables, and, as this one was at the end, few would come here. Looking at my plate, I couldn't help but marvel at the skills of the academy's chefs. The meal was simple but elegant. Though the instructor had said it would be something special, I didn't find it to be of the luxurious type. I might have been biased in my opinion, but the food looked like an everyday thing. The meat was grilled thoroughly and arranged in pieces. Looking at the size of the meat, I could tell it was some sort of monster meat. Not that the academy would provide anything ordinary. Then there were some vegetables as a side dish, accompanied by some creamy desserts. I had never been a picky eater. As I took the first bite, I sensed people approaching me. You never have the habit of waiting for someone, do you? Amelia sat across from me, in her own refined way. She had become quite casual with me over the days. Giving her a short glance, I continued to eat, only for John to sit beside me. Don't ignore me. Amelia's voice reached my ears, though I decided to ignore her for the time being. Honestly, I wasn't being disrespectful. My hunger was real. Did you pass? But on second thought, I decided to give a girl at least some face value. After all, she had some real value for me. At my question, Amelia's face turned a little darker. HM, you might have been some big shot in the test, but that doesn't mean others are shit. What was this crude language? Did all the main characters have some secret fetish for such rough things? I had observed the same behavior in Vienna too. Even John was surprised by her words. Cough. Let's finish the food before it gets cold. Seemingly realizing her mistake, Amelia kept her head down for the time being. Can we join you? I had to raise my head from the plate before me once more, as Diana had approached us. Looking at her, I could see that she wasn't alone. Alicia, Kevin, and Noah were behind her, though none of them seemed pleased with Diana's decision to dine with me. I mean, Kevin and Alicia certainly didn't have positive expressions. As for Noah, he had his regular smile plastered over his face. Not finding any reason to be dramatic, I just nodded my head. Seeing my confirmation, Diana moved closer to me and sat just beside me on my right. I was now sandwiched between John and Diana, while the other three sat beside Amelia on the opposite side. An awkward silence ensued. I didn't try to correct it, as I was more focused on the meal before me. You really are something else. Scoring all the points by yourself. I'm starting to feel that we were pretty useless at the practical. Diana spoke in a low voice, closer to a whisper. Huh. Though I found the current development of events favorable for my goals, I didn't like these kinds of situations. Sitting and eating with the main characters of the game, some of them being my biological siblings. For the entirety of the time, I had never even acknowledged the presence of Alicia and Kevin, let alone spoken to them. After all, they had no real value in my eyes. But she had. The monsters were weak. I kept my answer short. Though I had no desire to go through an interview, I had to at least give Diana some reply. There was no point in being extremely distant with her. Still, that didn't mean I had to act all buddy-buddy with the Veltron princess. Is that so? Diana kept looking at me for a few seconds before shifting her focus to the food before her. As she was sitting close to me, I could smell her perfume. She seemed to have washed her hair, as the fragrance of her shampoo filled my senses. There was a long silence before. Are you evolving soon? Noah asked me, his eyes never leaving my face. Though his question felt like a natural thing to ask, I could sense the underlying jealousy in it. There's still time for that. I didn't even look into his eyes while replying. But Noah, as always, had his bright persona on full display. You are strong, man. Maybe I could get a tip or two. Ha ha ha. Weird. That was the only thought in my mind. If he wanted to act, couldn't he make himself sound more believable? Even John, with his little brain, could see the sarcasm in Noah's tone. Amelia had been surprisingly quiet the entire time. Was she shy? I didn't react to Noah's provocation, but I could feel the slight gaze that Diana had fixed on him. But the protagonist, being oblivious to his own remarks, munched down the meat, drinking some juice along with it. Huh? How could someone have juice with meat? These commoners. Though I wasn't looking at him, I could picturize his actions using my mana sense. And that was what made it possible for me to notice the subtle glances from Kevin and Alicia. The Frost siblings found themselves left out of the conversation. Even Diana didn't try to amend anything between us. I mean, how could she, when even the two of us had barely talked since the test? Following Noah's weird remarks, along with some of John's antics, the dinner concluded in silence. Wawa. It was for the 7th time that John had yawned until now. Since the practical ended, the classes had begun as per the normal schedule. Well, that was until now. I glanced at the students that had just entered our class. Though I didn't know their names, I had an idea of who they were. Clap, clap. Can we please have the attention, everyone? One of the seniors stepped forward. As a fairly good-looking boy, he was quickly able to grab everyone's focus. Many of you may know us, but for those that don't, we are members of the student council. There were brief murmurs among the students, but not loud enough to disturb the class. Seeing that everyone was now attentive, the boy cleared his throat. We have been sent to recruit more members for the council from the first years. As you all know, it is a rule of the academy to at least recruit 10 students for the council from among the first years. Yeah, there was that. As the 5th years graduated, the student council always needed to fill up the necessary numbers from among the first years. This recruitment drive was the same. The difference being, the students didn't have the autonomy to join on their whim. They could only apply for the council, and then, after proper evaluation of the given students, the council would appoint the most capable ones. As for the criteria of the selection, it wasn't a fixed one and could vary depending on the student. Some were selected for their combat prowess, while others were given seats for their intelligence. The council also needed students who excelled in accounting and other miscellaneous tasks, so as to keep records for all the activities of the student council. I just want to inform you all that we are now ready to accept new students, and whoever wishes to join can visit the council room and fill out the given application form. He paused for a second, looking at the other seniors who had accompanied him. If you have any queries regarding the process and the selection criteria, you may consult anyone among them. He gestured with his hand, pointing at the students standing beside him. And yes, don't worry about their time and all. They're a cooperative bunch. The other council members avoided the looks that were directed at them. They had been practically kidnapped to do these boring tasks, and now the kidnapper was leaving all the work on their plates, without personally having anything to do. Many felt like crying, as managing the applications from the entire first year, and even some among the senior years, was a challenging and time-consuming task. But keeping their mouths shut, they just followed the hierarchy that they were bound to. The senior swept his gaze across the room to see if any student had questions to ask. As no one raised their hand, the council members exited the class. Are you joining them? John's question brought me out of my thoughts. I massaged my neck. I had been thinking about the same thing. Joining the council does provide some tangible benefits, but then again, the responsibilities outweigh the real gains that I could receive from the council. The second thing being, I didn't really enjoy being ordered around. Joining the council meant I would have to listen to the higher-ups, and I had no interest in doing so, unless... HM, I would have to follow orders if I was at the bottom of the hierarchy, but if I somehow got a good position from the start, then... But how would I even get that? I had no real connection to any existing members of the council. And, sigh, there's no need to think much. I didn't even have to make any active efforts, as my logic had derived a simple answer. I was too big to ignore. If my information was correct, in about a few months a tournament would be held, and the winner would have a greater chance to become the next student council president. But winning would only provide the student with a higher chance to become the president. A chance, not a guarantee. Becoming the student council president required support from other members of the council, and the greater the position a member had, the more value his vote carried. But such value depended not only on the position of the member in the council, but also on the individual ranking of the student in his respective year. And that included the personal strength of the individual to a large extent. So the candidate contesting for the position of the student council president had to have the backing of the strongest and the most influential individuals in the academy. And taking all these things into consideration, one didn't have to be a genius to figure out my value on the board. I was sure that many would approach me to recruit me under their own faction. Let's see. After a long pause, I replied to John's question. Do you want to join them? Who, me? Huh. Like they would take someone like me. John answered with an awkward chuckle. So you don't want to join? I gave him a brief glance before focusing my attention elsewhere. John, too, didn't say anything, as he was engrossed in his own thoughts. Thinking again, let's visit the council. I grabbed John by his hand before yanking him to walk with me. Huh, are you going to apply now? No. Then, it's you who is applying for the membership. But Kael dash. I didn't wait for him as I made my way out of the class. Being laid back wouldn't be as beneficial as taking active efforts. It was better to establish my presence in the academy in a more refined manner than just sitting back and waiting for someone to approach me. Sometimes being passive equated to a lack of confidence, and that could damage my authority and the weight behind my words. I had to be the one having the upper hand in any negotiation, irrespective of whether they were truly useful to me. Kael, hey, I don't think there's any use for me to apply. John spoke, his hands slightly gripping the sides of his uniform. Was he nervous? What are you worried about? If I don't get selected, wouldn't that damage my dash? Reputation? I asked without stopping on the way to the room designated for the council. Cough. Yes, that and dash. You have one. Reputation. What? Of course, Kael, I have dash. Yeah, I get that, John Bonner. You certainly have a reputation. The council room was quite far. After around 15 minutes of long walk, we had finally reached our destination. I thought about knocking on the door, but as it was the seniors who had asked us to visit, I skipped the formalities. Pushing the door wide open, we entered the room. The room was actually a wide hall with several small rooms in its enclosed space. Each of the smaller rooms had a signboard above them. There were some for the several committees in the student council, while some were separate rooms for positions of importance in the council. As for our registration, it was in the open space between all the rooms. A huge table was spread out, with several students skimming through various files. Noticing our arrival, one of the seniors waved at us. I glanced at John once before walking towards the senior. Are you here to enroll for the council selections? The senior asked us. Yes. Giving a brief reply, I pushed John forward. Register his name. The senior looked at John for a second longer before shifting his focus to me. You're Kael Frost, right? The top ranker in the first year. He kept looking at me with narrowed eyes, as if truly trying to remember my identity details. What of it? At my question, the senior shifted from his previous expression, now closer to something like confusion. Shouldn't you apply for the council too? With your abilities, you'll surely get recruited. The position isn't attractive enough. Not worth the troubles. After a long pause, I replied in a measured tone, without sounding arrogant. The senior's eyes flickered with surprise. Not attractive? I think you get pretty decent benefits, including dash. Write his name. I interrupted the council member's speech midway. I already knew all the benefits. The senior was flustered for a moment before he took out an application form. Here, write your name and year. Also write your reason for joining the council. You may also add your combat or any other specialties in this column. Explaining the necessary details, the senior stepped back, letting John fill out the form. I too waited in silence, my gaze wandering around the hall. There were quite a number of students in the council. Well, it was expected, as the academy had students till the 5th year. To manage such large numbers, the student council had to have a decent force for themselves. And looking at each of the students, I sensed that not even a single one of them was weak. All of them were in their silver ranks, with some on the verge of evolving to the next rank. Not that they could, at least not in a year or two. Being on the verge of evolving and having the capability to evolve were two entirely different things. But I could say that each of the students here was a force to be reckoned with in the outside world. Though there were many silver rankers in the world, the number was large because so was the entire population of the world. But the ratio of rankers was truly small. So achieving the silver rank, while being a student, was pretty decent, even by my standards. And the ones on the verge of evolving to the gold rank were even greater monsters than the rest. Another reason why the student council was valued so much and had such great authority in the academy was not only because of the present strength of its members, but also their future potential. Each member of the council was a monster in their own right, and no student or staff member was foolish enough to antagonize any of them. After graduating from the academy, Every member of the student council had gone on to become the most influential individuals in the world. Their words had weight in the broader politics of the entire planet. Here, having filled his form, John handed it to the senior, who had just patiently waited on the side without saying anything else. Not for a second did I take this kind of behavior as normal. This guy, Kael, was it? The senior directed his attention at me once again. Surely he was waiting for another chance to talk with me, without sounding desperate. If getting a low-rank position is your only reason for not joining the council, then does that mean that in case you are offered a good amount of power, you may have a change of interest? The senior asked in an above-formal polite voice, as the candidates who were going to fight for the position of the president needed the support of the council members. It was normal for the council to be divided into different factions, each supporting their own leaders. This guy seemed to be part of some faction too. I just nodded my head at his question. Seemingly satisfied with my response, the senior gave us a bright smile. Well then, have a good day. As the senior waved at us, John replied with an equal gesture. I had already begun to leave the hall. As I had come here with John just to help him fill out the form, it seemed to have given the desired message to at least one of the factions in the council. With that, John's entry into the council was fixed with 100% certainty. Just as I was about to grab the handle of the door, it opened from the other side. I had already removed my hand from the handle, as my attention shifted to the person entering the hall. With dark black hair and equally black eyes, a girl with a royal bearing stepped in. The firstborn of the Frosts, and Kael's elder sister, Victoria Frost. As soon as she opened the door and saw another person before her, Victoria paused before raising her head to look into my eyes. Her stoic expression remained the same, with no change whatsoever. Though I had already seen the slight raise of her eyebrows, something she quickly managed to hide, but I didn't have much impression of the girl before me. My memories of her were still blurry, and not much was known about her relationship with Kael, besides the fact that it certainly wasn't on good terms. Victoria was one of the best talents that the Frost had ever produced. It was only due to the fact that she was a girl that she was not given the position of the heir to House Frost. As for the character named Victoria, she had a major presence in the game. Combined with her talent and beauty, it made her one of the most liked members of Noah's harem. Though their romance took years to actually succeed, as Victoria had never been an easy girl. For someone like her, to choose a man meant that the given individual had to have the kind of power that could make her submit to him. And Noah, for being the protagonist, had all the cheats available to him. As for Victoria's position in the academy, right now she was the vice president, something that was a remarkable feat for her age. Being in such a position while being a third year was a feat worthy of commendation. The current student council president surely had an eye for talent, as despite the opposition, he had chosen Victoria to lead the council along with him. Though I knew there was more than one reason for him selecting her. The silence continued for a while, with none of us initiating any form of conversation. On my part, I saw no need to converse with her. And for Victoria, Kael had always been an eyesore, or at least that was what had been described in the game. Student Kael, are you enrolling for the council by any chance? Another girl stepped in from behind Victoria to fill the silence that had ensued between us. No, just helping a friend. I spoke in a low voice, briefly glancing in John's direction. John, to his credit, had his eyes widened in surprise, not expecting me to call him a friend. Okay. So you aren't registering? I don't want to sound rude, but may I know the reason? I looked into the eyes of the girl. Miss Ella White. The girl named Ella introduced herself. Miss White, I think you should be focusing more on those who have already enrolled their names instead of asking me. I paused to let the words sink in. Ella had a frown across her face on hearing my answer. But, not interested. I cut her off before exiting the hall through the narrow space beside the two girls standing before us. Seeing my polite rejection, Ella didn't call me out any further, and I could sense both of them entering the council room. I had thought Victoria would glance at my back before entering, but she did nothing of the sort. At least that confirmed the information from a game, to some extent, and reduced any reason for me to hold back against her, should she try to stand against me in any way in the future. Not that I would have done anything of that sort, even if Victoria had been close to Kael. I mean, why should I? Victoria and the Frost were Kael's family, not mine. There was no need for me to dwell over past baggage. That was your sister, right? John spoke from behind me. I turned to look at him for a moment before resuming my walk to the class. Taking my silence as confirmation, John went quiet for some time. So the rumors had been true. After a long pause, John cleared his throat while speaking. I had heard that you weren't on good terms with your family, but seeing today, I guess the rumors were understated. You could be said to be on the worst terms, huh? John was speaking more to himself than to me. I didn't interrupt his monologue. I mean, I kind of had an inkling when you never initiated any conversation with your siblings despite being in the same class. But this distaste was on a more grand scale. Hey, John, Igriegagis. I stopped for a moment before fixing my entire focus on him. I have no interest in discussing anything pertaining to that family. So, I didn't conclude my statement, but John seemed to have received the message. Normally, I wouldn't say such things openly, but this guy was bound to be with me for a long time. Couldn't have him questioning me every now and then. The rest of the walk continued in silence, as neither I nor John had anything to discuss. Well, it was mainly John who was always the first to start any conversation between us. As we approached closer to the classes, I could see a huge crowd just before the entrance to the class. The nearby students, noticing my arrival, went silent as I moved to the center of the crowd. Huh, you think being in a class makes you some big shot? Nah, I'm a big shot. No doubt about that. Slap. The student on the right slapped the other one on his face. How does it feel, big shot? Here, take my shots, dash. Bam. Crack. Damn, someone stop these lunatics. Not from my class. Mine neither. I just watched the brawl before me in silence. No matter what the issue had been, these students were foolish not to think about the consequences of their actions. One thing that NAMDA didn't tolerate was indiscipline among the students. No matter what social status they had, such behavior wouldn't go unpunished. And I was proven right, as a team of seniors, probably from the student council, had entered the scene. All of them were at the peak of silver rank. The arrival of the disciplinary committee had silenced the place in seconds. Swoosh! The students fighting were immediately detained by the council, their bodies pressed against the hard floor. He started it first. Really? The bastard dash. Huh? Who are you calling a bastard? Sir, I can say this guy isn't worth a grain of trust. What the hell is that phrase? Is everyone from your class such shit? Oh yeah, come here, motherfucker dash. I would advise you to use proper language. Both students went silent at the words of the senior. The student council was strong and influential, but not every committee within the council enjoyed the same level of respect. And the disciplinary committee was the only one which had the power that could rival even the decisions of the highest members of the council, excluding the president. Even a vice president couldn't freely order them around, as the motive behind having a disciplinary committee was to discipline the students. And such a thing couldn't be achieved if the committee was under constant supervision by other students. Leaving aside these details, every student in the committee was stronger than their counterparts. That itself gave the disciplinary committee a level of authority that could be rivaled by very few. I will give you a minute to confess to your crimes, and I hope you can knock some sense into your heads in the meantime. Upon hearing the warning, neither of the two students spoke. Even if someone gave you a chance, it would be foolish for anyone to accept their mistakes. And from the looks of it, the disciplinary committee member hadn't given them a chance, but an ultimatum. The other seniors waited for the minute to pass. Silence. As the minute passed, the senior sighed, seeing that neither of the two wanted to confess. Well, he had at least given them a fair chance. It was their mistake for not taking the heaven's hand. Now only the worst awaited them. Leave them. Return to your classes. We will discuss this issue later and execute the required punishment for the offenders. Saying his part, the detained students were released. Many had surprise on their faces, including the students in question, as they had expected some kind of immediate action against the rule breakers. But little did they know, the student council had its own way of making students regret their choices for a long time in the academy. That was some classic show. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. The crowd soon parted, and everyone walked to their respective classes. Conflicts among the students had always been a natural flow of events in the academy every year. The seniors were used to such things. Most of the noble students at the academy were from influential and affluent backgrounds. Hence, there was bound to be some tussle between them. Ego was always the first thing that escalated such foolish conflicts. Are you joining the council too? Diana had somehow spawned from behind us. I didn't reply to her question. Had you been stalking me? You walked out of the class the moment those council members had finished their part. So I just guessed that you went for the registration. Placing her index finger on her lips, Diana gave me a side glance. It was for John. It had been the third time since I had clarified the same thing. Diana gave John a small smile, to which the latter blushed. Are you enrolling? I was thinking about it. Diana muttered. Then, as if suddenly coming to a realization, she looked at me. What do you think? Should I join? Diana had stepped closer to me, her head slightly tilted in my direction. Looking into her wide eyes that stared back at me, I thought for a moment. The council needs competent members. Diana had a frown across her face. I know that. That's good. I had already reached the entrance of the class, and I'm free tonight. I spoke while glancing at Diana for the last time, who still had a confused look on her face. Hearing my words, she blushed for a moment before nodding her head. Though I found her reaction odd, I chose to ignore it for the time being. As I stepped in through the class entrance, John grabbed my arm from behind. Dude, you are crazy. It hasn't even been a month since the academy started, and you already have a girl. That too at this level. Mun. John's eyes flashed with reverence. My statement had indeed been a misleading one. Or was it? Not finding any reason to correct him, I walked towards my usual seat. Feeling a gaze directed at me, I extended my mana sense to check my surroundings without turning back. And surprisingly, it was Alicia who was boring holes in my head with her intense gaze. The next class was going to start in about 5 minutes. I could see the students entering the classroom one after the other. No one wanted to be late, as it was Elsa Senior's lecture. And getting on her bad side was the last thing anyone would have ever wished for. Your favorite teacher, huh? John had made himself comfortable near me once again. Sometimes, I had thoughts about his interests. I just hope he didn't swing the other way. I really did. Talp, talp. With the clicking of high heels, the earlier chaos in the class had finally died down. Elsa stood on the podium, moving her eyes across the entire class. Her red hair was freely flowing down, with a long overcoat giving her an aesthetic look. Damn, she's incredible. John muttered from beside me. I had to agree. Elsa's fashion sense was one of the best that I had ever seen. Though she wore normal clothes, the way in which she matched her outfits was nothing short of mesmerizing. I hope everyone's here. Elsa's soft yet commanding voice echoed across the room. All of you have performed quite well in your first practical session. For that, let's give a round of applause for yourselves. Clap, clap, clap. The students began to clap in chorus, their faces bright with smiles. Who didn't want to be appreciated? All right, that's enough. At Elsa's statement, the students refocused their attention on her once again. The Veltran Empire was one of the strongest among the major powerhouses in the world. Though it was an empire of humans, a race that was considered the weakest among all the races in Jotun, that did not reduce the influence or the strength of the empire in any way. Humans may have been inherently weaker than the other races from birth, but that was on an individual scale. Humans were best known for their vast armies, an advantage of having a huge population. And humans, despite being born weak, had the determination to grow stronger than anyone else on the planet. They were the ones who knew the true despair of being weak and hopeless. That was the major drive behind their relentless pursuit of power. In today's era, many of the strongest individuals living on the planet were humans. So being one of the major empires that was dominantly human in nature gave the Veltrans a huge sense of pride in their roots. Such pride was also carried through the royal blood. Every child born in House Veltra always had huge expectations put upon their shoulders from the moment they could understand the world around them. But none of them had ever been crushed under such expectations. The royals were called royal for a reason. These individuals had that firm will that was consistent throughout their bloodline. Diana was the same. As the first princess of House Veltra, she was always at the forefront of the royal family. Her every action had always been looked after by her admirers and supporters, while scrutinized by some who weren't exactly said to be on good terms with the royal family. At first, Diana had stayed strong, trying to meet all the expectations that were put upon her. But time had soon taken its toll on her little shoulders. As she grew in age, the level of things that she had to engage in increased too, not giving her a moment's rest. Still, Diana had always been close to her family, especially her mother. Whenever she felt depressed, she talked with her mother to reduce the anxiety and concerns that plagued her mind. But as time passed, her mother had become engrossed in her duties as the Veltran Empress. That had left Diana all alone, with no one she could talk to. Though her siblings were there to support her, some things were such that they couldn't be shared with them. She didn't want to burden anyone with her grief. The next option that Diana had was to share it with people that she considered friends. But her status as the first princess prevented her from getting too close to anyone without being used for political reasons. So Diana had been left alone until she turned 8 years old. The empire had the strongest, noble houses serving under it. These were called the dukedoms, as they were just below the Veltran house in power and influence. But there was one such house that, despite being relatively on par with the royal family in power and status, hadn't made any claims on the royal throne. The House Frost. Duke Castor Frost was a close friend of Diana's father, Mayor Veltra, that had led to frequent visits from delegations of the Frosts. On one such day, Diana had come into contact with Alicia, who was the youngest among the Frosts. Alicia had accompanied her father to the royal palace, and that had led them to become friends. At first, Diana was hesitant about becoming close to anyone, but as her father had very good relations with the Frosts, she had no need to care for any political consequences of befriending Alicia. Since then, Diana had begun to visit the Frost mansion actively, playing with Alicia every now and then. Still, she didn't discuss any of her worries with Alicia, as the latter was a year younger than her. Over time, Diana had become close friends with Kevin and Victoria, as all of them played together. That was also when she had met him, a boy who shared the signature dark black hair and equally dark eyes of the Frosts. Kael Frost. He was the same age as her, and being the heir to the Frost dukedom, Diana had begun to get a lot closer to him. From her perspective, he was the same as her, as he had to bear the responsibilities of his house from a young age. Diana and Kael had quickly grown to become best friends, with both of them sharing more time with each other than with their respective families. And Kael's soft nature was a bonus on top. He would always listen to what Diana had to say without interrupting her or making her feel wronged in any way. But soon Diana had noticed that, unlike her, Kael didn't take his duties much seriously. As the princess, she had begun her training from a young age, when she was barely 6 years old. Though the training was basic in general, it was harsh for children of her age. But Kael, Diana had not seen him train even once. He would always indulge himself in different activities, enjoying his life to the fullest. Over time, she had begun to feel jealous of him for being so free-willed. Kael, on his part, would always console Diana whenever she felt like crying. He was always there to support her, no matter the circumstances or his ability to solve her problems. That time was the best time of her life. But as fate had always been, nothing lasted for long. When Diana had turned 10 years old, her visits to the Frost mansion had begun to decrease. It was not because she was getting into fights with any of the Frost youngsters, but because the usual joyous atmosphere in the mansion had begun to turn darker. There wasn't a time when Diana hadn't seen Duke Castor scolding Kael for his negligence, and the matter never seemed to stop. Kael too never listened to his father and always argued back, leading to more arguments between the father-son duo. That it wasn't the arguments themselves that scared Diana, but the way in which Kael spoke. It was far different from the usual soft voice that Kael had. Kael argued with such immense hatred in his eyes that Diana would get scared of him. After all, at that time she was just a little girl, and seeing her closest friend behaving in such a volatile manner made her fear him. Though she tried her best not to show that fear when talking to Kael. Diana didn't want Kael to feel alienated. She wanted to make him understand that he had people around him to talk to share his concerns with. But Kael never did anything of the sort, and largely began to ignore her. He didn't outright reject her, but Diana felt the distance between them growing apart with each passing day. It was as if Kael had been disappointed in all of them. Diana wanted to understand him, to console him in the same way that he had helped her in the past 2 years. But she never got the chance. Soon, years passed, and Diana had turned 14 years old. As she was now old enough, the responsibilities that were placed on her had increased by huge margins. She could no longer visit her childhood friends and had to manage her time with the fullest efficiency. It was only on weekends and some other days that Diana was able to meet Alicia and talk with her. As for the situation at the Frost Mansion, it had taken an even more intense turn. After a series of disastrous arguments, Duke Frost had decided to name Kevin as the new heir to the Frost Dukedom, and that had severely enraged Kael. If earlier Kael's retaliation was limited to verbal arguments, it had now escalated to him indulging in all sorts of pleasures, making his life even more miserable. And now not only the Duke, but even the rest of the family had started to openly neglect Kael as if he never existed. Even Alicia, who was once attached to Kael, had not even uttered a single word about him. As for Kael, Diana had never seen him in the mansion. He would always be out, partying and drowning himself in alcohol and all the other things that addicts usually did. On one such day, Diana had managed to make some time for herself and decided to visit Alicia. Reaching the mansion, she was greeted by the staff and soon led to Alicia's room. Opening the door, she could see Alicia reading from some book. "Never thought you would become a bookworm." At Diana's question, Alicia raised her head and her eyes widened slightly in surprise. "I thought you wouldn't be able to come for a week." Getting up from her chair, Alicia warmly hugged Diana, her lips curving into a small smile. "Well, you don't take the effort to visit me, so this princess has to do all the work." Diana chuckled while ending their hug. "Thank you for your troubles, Your Highness." Alicia bowed and returned to Diana's statement, holding the sides of her dress in an elegant manner. Both of them looked at each other for a moment before laughing at their antics. "So how's everything on your end?" Alicia asked after Diana took her seat on the chair beside the bed. Alicia approached from behind Diana while massaging her neck at the same time. Diana, appreciating the gesture, just smiled in return. "The same as always. Father wants me to look for someone to marry before it's too late," Diana said after a brief pause. "Huh? Has he gone crazy? Who marries at 14? You just wait, I will speak dash." "Calm down. He was just joking about it. Don't get stressed, mother, or else you'll end up losing these hairs." Diana chuckled while holding some of Alicia's hair that was within the reach of her hand. Alicia gave a little pout in return. Then, thinking for a second, her face soon turned into a frown. "And even if you wanted to get married, do you even have someone in mind?" Diana went quiet at the question. An image of a certain someone popped in her mind before she quickly discarded any unnecessary thoughts. "Well, I have you. Surely you will find someone for me, right?" This time it was Alicia's turn to go silent. No matter the circumstances, every now and then their conversations would end up revolving around the same person. The topics might have been different, but the end results were always the same. And Diana knew, no matter how much indifference Alicia tried to project, at the bottom of her heart she desired her happy family again. Bang. Fuck your rules. Both Alicia and Diana froze as the loud noise of something heavy crashing down, along with enraged shouts, reached their ears. Immediately dropping their conversation, they headed downstairs towards the source. "How about you fucking mind your own business, and let me do the same?" Arriving at the ground floor, a familiar scene greeted them, one which they were used to seeing frequently, but were never able to adapt to. Castor stood on one end of the hall, his eyes narrowed in silence. Just near him, standing beside the wall, was a boy in his teenage years. Kael's hand was bleeding as the splinters from the broken furniture had pierced his hand. As Alicia and Diana moved closer to Kael, just a glimpse of his eyes made them stop dead in their tracks. Kael's eyes had turned red, his hands trembling in anger. "Shout one more time, and I will have you know the serious consequences of whatever you are currently doing." Castor's calm yet commanding voice made everyone turn their attention towards him. Though he looked calm from the outside, no one could ignore the restrained fury that could be felt in his measured tone. "What are you two up to again?" Alia had reached the hall, her hands slightly covered in flour. She had just been engaged in cooking with the other maids when the crashing sound reached her ears. Though Alia had raised her voice to show her disappointment and anger at the argument between the father and son, everyone could feel the slight trembling in her voice. She was scared more than being angry at the moment. Kael was not in control of his emotions, and if Castor lost it too, then Alia didn't want to see the aftermath of their argument if it escalated further. Surely it would be more disastrous than whatever was happening at the moment. "TSK, tell your fucking husband to stop being a bitch." "Is that so?" Castor's voice was at its lowest, and along with it an invisible pressure had started to descend in the hall. It wasn't up to the point of crushing Kael, at least not yet. "Kael." Alia moved towards Kael, grabbing him by his arm. The commotion had attracted the attention of Kevin and Victoria, who had just entered from the main entrance. Kevin wanted to buy some things, so Victoria had tagged along with him to the market. Neither Kevin nor Victoria said anything, as they were stunned by the events unfolding before them. It had been many days since they had last seen Kael, so the atmosphere in the mansion was one of relative peace, though that peace was more of a forced silence. The family dinners that always used to be filled with joy and laughter were now no more than something that was done every night without any life in it. Their mother, who had always been the most cheerful person in the house, was now the one who talked the least. It was suffocating for Alicia, Kevin, and Victoria to see their mother in a constant state of worry. But there was nothing they could do about the situation, as it had long left the boundaries of control with no hope of de-escalation. At first, the arguments between Kael and their father were limited, but the day Kevin had been nominated as the new heir to the house was the day any chances of mending the broken relations were dissolved into thin air. You will go to your room this instant and stay put. Your dinner will be brought to you, so don't stay here for a second longer. Do. Go right now, Alia shouted at the top of her lungs. Cough, cough. Mother, raising her voice unnaturally, had led her to be out of breath for a moment, resulting in slight dizziness. Diana, along with Alicia, and the others rushed towards their mother to support her. I am. Cough. Fine. Alia tried to complete her sentence only to repeatedly cough, her throat overstrained from the earlier shout. Tisk. Seeing the situation, Kael clicked his tongue while heading towards his room. Kael dash. Don't say anything to him. But Mother dash. Please. Alia stopped Victoria, who was about to confront Kael for his lack of attention towards their mother. He didn't even look back to check whether Alia was fine, and kept walking toward his room. Castor kept observing his sons retreating back, his eyes getting a little moist, but the tears disappeared miraculously before they could even be formed. As the frost stayed near Alia, Diana took it upon herself to manage the situation. She glanced at Alicia, who kept looking at Kael. You stay here. I will check up on Kael. You don't have dash. Are you treating me as a stranger now? Does that mean I am not your family, and here I dash? All right, do as you please. Alicia interrupted Diana before she could begin her dramatic monologue. Still, she managed to give a faint smile as Diana moved towards the stairs. There is no need for you to get tensed over such things. Castor spoke while placing his hand on Alia's shoulder. Alia, in return, looked at him, her eyes teary from the earlier events. Look who's talking. You know he doesn't listen to us anymore. So why do you always try to provoke him? Can't dash. That was not provoking him, Alia. The kid needs to understand his place in society. He dash. He is no longer the heir, Castor. So is there any real reason for you to argue with him? Alia interjected before Castor could express his views. At her words, Castor went silent. He wanted to clarify his stance, but looking into Alia's eyes, he knew no amount of words would get through to her. A mother, no matter what happened, would always try to defend her son irrespective of how illogical her arguments were. Or was he being illogical here? Honestly, nowadays Castor didn't know what to do. Every decision that he took considering the welfare of the house was turned into something that felt like the most terrible choice that he could have ever made. Every day and night, Castor kept thinking to himself about where he had gone wrong. What sins had he committed for his family to come to such a state? There wasn't a moment of peace in this house. Not for him, nor for anyone else. Well, I'm getting hungry here. Mother, you surely wouldn't starve this son of yours. Kevin joked while helping his mother stand up. Alia just smiled at his attempts to diffuse the tense atmosphere as everyone made their way towards the dining hall. Crash! Another loud noise made them stop in their tracks. The smile that Alia had somehow managed to display was once again dimmed by the disturbance. Kael paced back and forth across his room, violently throwing whatever he could grab against the wall in a fit of rage. Damn those bastards. What the hell do they know about me? Bam! Crack! A cracking sound echoed as Kael hit his fist against the wall. Click! As the pain shot through his hands, Kael raised his head to look at the door that had just been locked from the inside. Diana stood with her hands folded, looking at the mess in the room. Adjusting her hair, she began to arrange everything in its original place. Kael just kept observing her without saying a word. Diana too didn't speak to him and continued to do her work. After around 10 minutes of silence, Diana had nearly cleaned up the entire room. Her speed was quite fast for someone who was used to living in the palace with servants following her every command. What are you doing? After everything was done, Kael looked at Diana, his voice hoarse. Diana just stared back at him. Thinking for a second, she moved in his direction, and after a moment's hesitation, sat next to him, her back against the wall. Silence. There wasn't a word spoken between the two, but somehow Diana didn't find the silence to be awkward in any way. She just sat in her place, her head slightly leaning against the wall. What are you doing? Kael asked again. This time his voice didn't have the same rage as before. Diana didn't reply, at least not immediately. What are you doing? Now, it was Diana who asked the same question to Kael. Kael raised his head and turned to look at her. Diana, too, sensing his gaze, stared back at him. For Diana, the time felt as if it had slowed down. It was after a long period of time that she had truly looked into Kael's eyes. But she could no longer find the same warmth in them as before. Kael's eyes looked more like those of a corpse than a living person. They had no light in them. Kael always had dark black eyes that were the signature of the Frosts. But at this instance, all Diana could see was even more darkness in them. It wasn't the color, but the feeling of something being lost from Kael's soul. Everyone might have been seeing the pathetic side of Kael, Diana included, but right now, as she stared into his eyes, he felt like the most pitiful creature she had ever seen. Kael too was lost in his thoughts as he gazed into Diana's gray eyes. Her face was as flawless as it always had been. Just go away. After a long pause, Kael spoke in a low voice, barely managing to form the words. Diana raised her hand and gently touched the face that was now close to her. She didn't say anything, but just caressed Kael's face with a warmth that he might not have felt in years. Kael at first wanted to swat her hand away, but couldn't bring himself to do it. It was as if his soul was yearning for something like this. Both of them didn't move an inch, staying in the same position for a while, before Kael's eyes widened in some sort of realization. He quickly retracted his head, thereby removing Diana's warmth that lingered on his face. Standing up, Kael moved towards his bed. Just get away from my place. Kael's voice was now indifferent, with no hints of previous uncertainty. Though he didn't turn back to face Diana, and kept looking the other way. Diana still had her hand outstretched before she slowly retracted it. Can't things return to as they were, Kael? Her voice trembled slightly as she stood up and turned to walk towards Kael. Why are you doing this? Do you hate us that much? She asked while standing just behind him. Kael didn't reply, nor did he turn to look at her. Do you even know what your family is going through? Her voice broke at the end. Alicia, do you know what she's going through? She has not even been able to sleep properly for the last few years. Diana didn't expect Kael to answer. She just wanted him to know what his family was facing due to his erratic behavior. Alicia has been taking sleeping pills for the last 2 years just to get an hour's sleep. You know what? Forget about Alicia for a while. Your mother, do you even have an idea of what she is going through? Diana raised her trembling voice, the built-up frustration taking over her mind. At first she had just come to console Kael, but somehow seeing Kael's indifferent attitude had begun to rub her the wrong way. She didn't want to hurt Kael in any way, but her emotions had already taken control of her actions. And it wasn't like what she had been saying was wrong in any way. All of the Frosts had been suffering in some way or another over the years. Diana wanted Kael to understand the consequences of his actions, even if only a little. And what if Kevin was made the heir? Since when were you so fixated on such titles? You just had to train to be competent enough, which you refused. So why or dash? Shut the fuck up. Kael's voice echoed through the room. Diana flinched behind him. Kael turned to look at her before grabbing her by the arm and yanking her body toward him. What the fuck do you know about me? Huh? Kael increased his voice again, the rage visible in his eyes that had now turned red again. Diana's heart had started beating faster the moment Kael shouted at her. It was the first time that he had done something like that. Normally, he would just ignore her, and Diana would be left with no one to speak to. But now, Alicia this, Alicia that. If you so much fucking care for her, then why don't you take her to your fucking place, huh? Kael's grip on Diana's arm tightened. Kael, it's hurting. Diana tried to push Kael away, but he didn't budge an inch. And why don't you look after your own family instead of meddling in others' affairs? Aren't you some royal? This time Kael pushed Diana onto the bed, his grip still firm on her hand. Diana's eyes began to turn moist, her heart unable to handle the turn of events. And what do you know about how I feel? You say that me losing the position of heir was my mistake, huh? That it's just some title, huh? Diana's body trembled under Kael's gaze. There wasn't a hint of the previous indifference in them. Right now Diana was more concerned about what was happening with Kael than being scared by the way he was treating her. Kael's eyes, they were turning more red with every passing moment. And it wasn't normal, at least by what Diana knew about the basics of the human body. Kael's rage felt more unnatural to her, like it wasn't Kael speaking, but someone else. No, that couldn't be, as she knew that the person before her was none other than Kael. But at the same time, he didn't feel like it. Stop, please. Diana's vision blurred as tears welled up in her eyes and soon began to fall. Is that what you always do when something goes against your wishes? Cry like a dash. Kael stopped midway as he looked at Diana's face. The silence extended as Kael kept staring into her eyes, which were now red due to the tears that were spilling out. You know what? Kael removed his hand from Diana's arm and then grabbed her face from the area around her mouth. This time his grip was even more intense than before. Kael. Diana could not even form the words, as Kael's grip on her mouth made her unable to do so. You were here to console me. That was the reason you had come here. Kael spoke more to himself than to Diana. His eyes had narrowed in some sort of excitement. So how about you console me in better ways? Kael pushed Diana, making her fall on the bed. Kael. Huh? Diana woke up with a loud shout. Taking deep breaths, Diana tried to calm her beating heart. A dream. Her entire body was covered in sweat. She had returned from the classes and decided to take a short nap before visiting Kael. Who knew it could become such a nightmare? Glancing at the clock nearby, the time was around 6 in the evening. There was still some time before dinner, so Diana decided to meet Kael. Thinking about Kael, she had mixed feelings. On one end, she was angry with him for whatever that had happened after the dream ended. But on the other side, she couldn't bring herself to hate him. When she had suggested Alicia to dine with Kael the other day, both of the Frost siblings had refused her request. They didn't want to be anywhere near him. Alicia had tried to talk Diana out of whatever she was getting herself into, but on Diana's repeated insistence, Alicia budged a little, and that had led them to eating together. Though Diana wanted to mend the relations between Kael and his siblings, she knew it would not be an easy task. Sometimes Diana wondered if she was making another mistake by talking to Kael again. After the banquet, Kael had gone missing. Duchess Alia had sent search parties for him, and Diana herself had tried to help in any way possible. But as a year passed, there was no sign of him returning. Over the years Kael was missing, Diana kept thinking about all the choices that she had made. Could she have done anything better given the circumstances? Could she have made Kael stay with them? Regret and guilt began to pile up in her mind, with no way to reduce them. So Diana was shocked when she saw Kael in the auditorium for the first time in 3 years. Her mind couldn't process what was happening before her. When she had glanced at Kevin and Alicia, the two of them were even more shocked than her. Kael had walked onto the stage with a refined elegance. With every step he took, Diana couldn't take her eyes off him. Within 3 years, he had grown a lot. His face was now sharper than before, but it was his body that had changed the most. The last image of Kael that Diana had in her mind was that of a teenage boy. But right now, though he wore a blazer, it couldn't hide the body beneath. Kael's speech was the next thing that turned Diana's entire understanding of him upside down. Since when had he begun to care for commoners so much? Well, Kael had never actively hated the masses, but neither did he have such strong feelings for them. One after another, Diana kept getting new revelations about her old childhood friend. Only when things had settled down could Diana think properly. Kael had ranked first in the entire academy, and that too with a score that was unprecedented in the history of Namda. Looking at him, though Diana couldn't sense his actual strength, she knew that he was stronger than her for sure. Even after the classes began, Diana tried to ignore his existence, but seeing his face every day made it difficult to do so. She was stuck in a loophole of wanting to talk to him and fearing the consequences of getting attached to him again. But then came the first practical session. Through sheer coincidence, Diana and Kael had been allotted to the same team. As Kael approached the team, it was the first time that Diana had seen him from such a close distance. The way he talked had changed a lot. If earlier, before his initial change, Kael used to have a soft way of talking, then he had become someone unpredictable who wouldn't end a single one of his sentences without cursing. But now, from Kael's words, it felt like he simply didn't care for what was happening around him. It was as if everyone around him was below his level, and something he had no need to waste his time on. As the practical began, Diana saw the dominating performance put up by Kael. He didn't waste a single movement and killed the first monster in a single strike. It was only in the practical that being in his vicinity made Diana realize her feelings again. She wanted to talk to him more than anything else. So she initiated the conversation. At first, Diana had thought of sounding mature and distant, but the more she talked to him, the more she lost control over her emotions and ended up crying before him. But her efforts paid off, and Kael had agreed to teach her. Though that was not what she had been aiming for, it was better than nothing. And now she was on her way to meet him. Diana kept repeatedly taking deep breaths to reduce her anxiety. Arriving before Kael's assigned room, Diana knocked twice. After a moment's silence, the door opened, and Kael appeared in his casual clothes. You know, there's a bell here. Splash. Washing your face with cold water just had a different vibe to it. The classes had been as boring as ever. Though Elsa's lecture was somewhat interesting, at the end of the day, I was not one of those study nerds. Attending classes like a kid was the worst thing that could have happened to me. Still, it wasn't like everything was so bad. I had asked Diana to meet me tonight before dinner. I was thinking of teaching her some basics today, though she might have known them already. But there was a difference between knowing something and actually practicing it. Looking at Diana's fighting style, I didn't have any doubt about it. The girl had never trained her physique seriously. If her mana supply was cut off, even a kid could smash her. Well, that was a bit of an exaggeration, as Diana was surely far more experienced than an average kid. She had a good technique, but that was it. In this world, everyone used their own weapon techniques. There was no fixed sword style that you could learn. I mean, I really didn't understand the mechanism behind having a sword style or any other fixed weapon style. In many fictional literatures and games, the characters had sword styles that were rated in stars. The more stars a sword art had, the better and the stronger it was. But I found the logic flawed. During a fight, how could someone fend off unpredictable attacks using a sword art that had a fixed number of moves under it? How could the constant pressure of live combat allow individuals to swing their weapons in specific ways that were given in any weapon art? Every sword art that I'd seen being used by the characters in the modern world had to begin from a certain stance or a predefined form. During a battle that demanded constant change in position, how could one start to use a weapon art without sacrificing his life? Surely the enemy wouldn't wait for the individual to get ready in order to unleash whatever weapon art he had learned. Then there was that about the characters shouting their moves in a loud voice before executing them. Even with my intelligence, I was at a loss of words for the logic behind such things. As for the techniques used in this world, all of them were a combined mass of everything a cultivator had learned in his lifetime. At the end of the day, when your life is at stake, you just have to swing the sword or any weapon that you have in order to evade the enemy's attack and proceed with your own. That was the main principle of the weapon techniques that was taught to everyone. You just had to keep on learning the variations in which you could use your weapon to its fullest extent and then apply all of the learned techniques in a battle according to what the situation demands. There was no complex theory behind it, just a simple rule of either surviving or killing your opponent. Just as I was thinking of calling Diana, there was a knock on the door. Not once, but twice. If I remembered correctly, a doorbell was attached to the wall beside the door. Huh. Making my way towards the door, I opened it only to find Diana waiting outside. You know there's a bell here. At my statement, she shifted her gaze to the wall and froze. That. You see, Dash. It's all right. Happens with many. I decided to save her from the possible embarrassment, but the damage was already done. I could see Diana's ears burning as they had changed to a shade of red. Well, it was more of an imaginary thing than an actual change in color. Let's go. Click. Closing the door behind me, I began to walk towards the training facility. The academy had allotted a special area for the students to train on their own, without any sort of disturbance. Your friend isn't with you? Diana asked on the way, as she looked around. John? He is a master of his weapon, so there's no need for him to train. Diana blinked her eyes at my statement. Which weapon does he use? Is he that strong? Remembering John's capability, I can't exactly speak about his strength. As for his weapon, he likes to use a spear, some sort of weapon from birth. The way you're talking, he sounds like a genius in it. Diana had a look of astonishment on her face. Yeah, he could be called a genius in spears. I spoke with a calm voice, thinking about John. As the topic ended, there was silence for some time, before I gave Diana a brief glance. You didn't invite any of your friends? Leaving Alicia and others, I don't really have any close ones. Diana scratched the back of her neck. Should I have invited more people? She stopped in her tracks, her voice a little panicked at the end. No, it's just that girls usually take someone with them before meeting other people. At least that was my understanding of their gender in general. Diana, realizing it wasn't any sort of problem, matched her steps with mine again. We normally do things like that, but that's only if the other person is a stranger or someone whom we don't know much about. Though she spoke it as a matter of fact, I could clearly see the message beneath. Was she trying to flirt? I didn't reply to her statement, as we were now near the training facility, though I could feel Diana's stare, as she was hoping for some kind of answer. Honestly, I didn't want to speak anything unnecessary that could damage my reputation as well as the fragile relation with her that I had just developed. Taking a measured approach was the best choice in my opinion. As we entered the facility, a massive complex greeted us. Everywhere around me, I could see training rooms with options for individual as well as group training exercises. Looking at our clothes, I knew we couldn't simply fight in them as it would be a little unfair to the clothes being used in combat. I walked toward a room that was meant for group training and pressed the unlock button on the panel before me. The door opened and a spacious hall greeted us. Change in the gym set, and meet me here again. Informing Diana, I made my way towards the men's changing room. The training set provided by the academy, was quite comfortable. It had a slim fabric that felt like it didn't even exist. And yes, it also looked like it didn't exist, as the fabric was quite closely attached to my skin. Still, I wasn't one to get embarrassed over such petty things. Entering the hall again, I saw Diana already waiting for me. Looking closely at her, I could see that she was uncomfortable in the clothes. Well, they were a little too perfect for her size. Her body. Leaving the minor details aside, I walked towards her. Diana, sensing me approach, turned to look at me and gave a faint smile. Maybe we should bring our own set instead of using the gear in the facility. Yeah. Diana smiled awkwardly as she knew what I was referring to. If you're too uncomfortable, we can head back to get new ones for you. I made the suggestion seeing how the clothes could hamper her opponent's focus during practice. At least an average opponent's. Honestly, I didn't have any issue with whatever she wore, but I still had to act like the gentleman that I was. It's okay. Normally they would be a little uncomfortable, but right now they aren't. Diana looked in my eyes with the same smile on her face. All right, let's begin then. I took a notepad that I had brought with me and began to make different columns in it. As I promised to teach her, I would go all out. Firstly, run 10 laps of the entire hall. No, do 20. That would give a fair measure. I spoke without taking my eyes off the notepad in my hand. Okay. Diana began to do a light warm-up before the run. And yes, don't use mana. I informed her. Diana's face froze midway. 20 laps without a mana? Yeah, that's the goal of this training. Diana didn't move her gaze from me for a while. Finding it odd, I looked up. Any issues? No, 20 laps it is. She muttered to herself. Why was she getting nervous over such a short distance? Arthur used to make me run for miles without using any mana. If I looked at it from that angle, I was being pretty lenient with her. Diana had now warmed up and was ready at one of the corners on the right. I took out a watch to measure her timing, and seeing everything was set. Start. Diana sprinted around the hall. Her speed was quite decent, but I could see her slowing down after the first lap. Regulate your breathing in proper intervals. Diana just nodded her head. Close your mouth. Breathe through your nose. I had to repeatedly correct many things that, according to me, should have been the basics of running short distances. I think it wasn't that Diana didn't know all these things, but running without using mana was draining her brain of the required oxygen, and hence she was making such silly mistakes. 15 more to go. I tried to motivate Diana, but surprisingly her face became paler at my statement. Try to take long strides. Be efficient. By the 8th round, Diana was panting like a cough. She seemed quite tired. Keep going. Giving another round of motivation, I looked at the watch. Though her speed was decent in the beginning, her stamina was shit. Even a turtle was better than her. Maybe that was a bit of an understatement. I could say a snail was better than the princess. Like, how could someone be so slow? Remembering my days when I was under Arthur's training regime, Thinking about that, I guess I was a far greater genius than what I originally believed. Maybe only people like Noah could challenge me in physical endurance. That is, among individuals of my generation. I wasn't arrogant enough to think myself superior to the other undying monsters in this world. Arthur himself was far stronger than me, even without using his mana. Well, considering his rank, it should have been an obvious outcome, but I knew Arthur had been the same strong guy even in his initial stages. But I wasn't disheartened by the fact. I knew that someday I would easily surpass him, or at least that was what I was hoping for. But once I healed Arthur's damaged core, I knew for sure that a beast like him would grow at a much faster pace than me. His core was the only thing that was limiting his growth at present. Once that obstacle was removed, still, it didn't matter much. Why should I be jealous of my employee? The more he grows, the better for me. 5 more. Diana had now completed 15 rounds, and her speed, it was pathetic. The thing I was seeing was even worse than how average people walk. Diana was swinging her arms like a fool, her legs barely managing to scrape the distance. There wasn't even an ounce of her royal elegance left. All I could see was a peasant. No, a malnourished peasant. That's enough. There was no point in making her run if she could barely walk. The moment she heard my order, Diana's body crashed onto the floor. Lying on her back, she began to breathe heavily. Close your mouth. I had to remind her again. I stood near her, waiting for the girl to normalize her breathing before she could process my instructions. As I glanced at her body, these clothes were the stupidest things I had ever seen. How could the headmaster hire such a shit designer? Even I can make better gear than this, whatever it was called. Diana, sensing my gaze on her body, looked at me, only to shift her eyes to the ceiling again. What was that? Thinking that my actions might seem wrong, I shifted my gaze to the notepad again. There was still a lot of tests to be done before I could get an overview of her body. Only after understanding her physical capabilities could I formulate a proper plan for her training. Push. My voice echoed through the empty hall as I encouraged the girl below me. Diana was currently trying to perform a push-up with her utmost effort. Even I had to commend it. Despite not being able to do a single one, she didn't accept defeat. But that was it. Get on your knees. Hearing my instruction, Diana looked up at me with a confused expression. Touch your knees to the ground, and then do the push-ups. It's a newbie version. Diana's eyes narrowed in what appeared to be a look of betrayal, but she obeyed nonetheless. Well, I was going to suggest the easier method, but I had to first see what she could do in the actual way. Placing her knees on the floor, Diana went down and pushed her body up again, completing her first nearly successful push-up. Though the form was a little bad, she had completed the push-up. Next, Diana went down again and stayed there without being able to push herself up. Kael, can we do something easier? Are you really expecting me to get better at these exercises from day one? This time Diana didn't have her usual soft smile, but an intense gaze was directed at me. Maybe I had pushed her a little too far. On my part, I had performed decently while doing push-ups for the first time. But yeah, I couldn't expect everyone to be the same as me. Huh, take your sword. Informing her, I headed to the center of the hall, taking my own sword from the storage. Diana followed me as she took out her weapon. The training facility had its own weapons, but they were of lower quality than the ones given to us at the start of the classes. Well, that was fair enough. The weapons here were meant to be broken if the fight got too intense, in order to prevent any possible severe injuries to the students. Though according to me, if the combatant was skilled enough, he could kill anyone even with a chipped blade. Gripping the sword in my right hand, I waited for Diana to stand before me. Diana swung her sword a few times, a type of warm-up for her wrists. Maybe, arriving before me, she immediately got into her stance, taking the required distance between her feet. Seeing me stand casually against her without even holding the sword in any proper way, Diana raised her brow, but didn't comment. Attack me. Other than defending, I will not move an inch. Remember my first fight with Arthur? I applied the same rules. And yes, you can use mana for this fight. I won't. Diana frowned as I dictated the rules. Though I wanted to increase her physical capabilities, I would not be able to achieve anything if she herself didn't realize the extent to which she was limiting her growth by relying on mana. And crushing her confidence in mana usage was the surefire way to do so. Diana, feeling that she was being looked down upon, had an unpleasant expression on her face. But knowing that I was stronger than her, she complied with my instructions. The girl was pretty obedient. As I had restricted using my mana, that also meant that I couldn't use mana sense. That reduced my situational awareness by large margins. But my base abilities were strong enough to counter any such reduction. That was the benefit behind training your physique, and I had to make Diana understand the same. Diana slowly inched towards me, her sword extended parallel to the ground. Her eyes were now focused on me. Swoosh! In the blink of an eye, Diana had appeared beside me, her sword already aimed at my side. Clank! Though I was caught a little off guard by her speed, that was it. Easily blocking her attack, I brushed her sword aside. Before I could look into her eyes, a kick came from my left. Diana had already positioned one of her hands on the ground and was using it to land a kick to my neck. Too bad for her. My left hand shot up, grabbing her leg by the ankle. Diana, not expecting such a swift response, widened her eyes before thrusting her sword at the same time. Her flexibility to do such a maneuver was great, but I picked her up from the ground using my grip on her ankle and yanked her body to the side. Diana, even after being disadvantaged, managed to land properly before charging at me again. I kept observing her footwork. Though she was quite fast with how she moved her legs, the pattern was quite obvious after the first exchange. She hadn't yet learned any diversity in footwork and was just using a combination of 2 or 3 different techniques. But none of them were perfected, as could be seen through the messy combo that she was unleashing on me. Clank, thud, clank. One after the other, I kept deflecting her sword while blocking her blows at the same time. With every attack, I could feel the power behind them increasing in quick succession. Not getting the required results, Diana had instinctively focused on relying on brute force. Bam! One of her punches managed to land on the area around my stomach, but I just glanced at Diana, who had a shocked expression on her face. Even if you use mana, it doesn't necessarily guarantee the success of your strike. My body was far sturdier than what she had assumed. Diana quickly retracted her hand and took some distance from me. Even after using mana, she was getting tired. Sweat had formed on her forehead, and the nape of her neck was drenched in it. Diana swung her sword in the air a few times, loosening her joints in the process. 1, 2, 3, swoosh. She was before me again, this time her sword directly aimed for my neck. Though her speed was impressive, I didn't even have to defend against the attack. I merely sidestepped, and Diana's entire balance fell over, making her stumble on the floor. Don't bet your entire attack on a single move. From my observation, Diana was being impatient. Instead of executing multiple moves to defeat the opponent, she was trying to finish the fight with a single attack. Each of her strikes had tremendous power behind them, and according to me, that was a pathetic waste of mana reserves. Diana slumped down on the ground after her failed strike. So how should I defeat someone? Raising her voice, Diana let her body relax against the cold floor. Use every attack as a distraction before dealing the final blow. The sound of my footsteps echoed as I made my way towards the viewing area. The chair squeaked under my weight. Is that even possible? How will I even know which attack is the final one? And what if one of my attacks that was meant to be a distraction goes on to become the real strike? That's up to you to find out. My response was short. Glancing at the watch, it was time for dinner. Giving Diana a final glance, I headed towards the changing room. Is it over? Kael. Closing her eyes for a moment, Diana stood up and headed to change her clothes too. Why is she not here yet? For the last 10 minutes, Alicia was pacing back and forth across her room, waiting for Diana to arrive. Despite her reluctance, Diana had gone to train with him. Alicia couldn't understand the logic behind everything that Diana was getting herself into. First, that stupid dinner, and now the girl was just hovering around him. Even during the classes, Alicia had always observed Diana turning back to take a glimpse of Kael. Thinking about that guy brought unpleasant memories, leaving a bitter taste in her mouth. Diana, too, had suffered due to him. Still, she was behaving like nothing had happened in the past, and was talking to Kael like it was an everyday thing. What's up? Noah's voice brought Alicia back from her thoughts. Nothing, just dash. Is it about Diana? Noah sat across on a chair, his legs crossed, looking at her. Yes. After a long pause, Alicia muttered the words. Why are you worrying so much? Isn't he your brother? Noah asked in an innocent voice. As Alicia raised her head to look at him, she stopped for a moment as Noah's hair caught her attention. Alicia had grown to like his hair. A mixed shade of black and white was the perfect match for his innocent face. Looking at him again, Noah indeed looked a little charming. Cough. Noah coughed under the intense gaze that was directed at him. Alicia, as if realizing her mistake, shifted her focus elsewhere, pretending as if nothing had happened. He is indeed my brother, but things are complicated. Alicia gave up on elaborating on the topic. Though she didn't have a good impression left of her brother, he was still, at the end of the day, a Frost. And even if Noah was now closer to her, that didn't mean she would tell him anything that could result in the image of the Frost degrading in any way. It was not that she didn't trust him, but it was something that had been ingrained in her since childhood. Noah, too, getting the message, didn't press further. This was one of the many things that Alicia liked about him. Noah would somehow know when to speak to her, what to ask her, and how to console her, without her even telling him anything about her problems. It hadn't even been a month since the academy began, and Alicia had grown to become fond of him. It was around 8 in the night, and Diana had promised to come over to eat dinner with them. But seeing no sign of her, Alicia decided to head towards the cafeteria herself. She had a strong feeling that the girl would be eating out with Kael. Just as Alicia moved towards the door, it opened from the outside. Diana peeked from the narrow gap, giving a wave to both of them. You sure are late. I thought we would be dying of hunger waiting for you. Noah's cheerful voice made Diana chuckle lightly. Seems like you enjoyed the training quite a bit. I don't think you had a gracious dash. I am hungry too. Let's go. Diana quickly retreated out of the room, seeing the stern expression on Alicia's face. Alicia took a deep breath to calm the raging emotions in her heart. If looks could kill, Diana would have already died a million times. So what did you train? Before Alicia could close the door, Noah had joined Diana as they walked towards the cafeteria without waiting for her. Clenching her fist, Alicia locked the door before following her 2 stupid friends. As she matched her steps with Diana, Alicia noticed the carefree smile on her friend's face. Diana, right now, looked a lot younger than before. All the words that Alicia had wanted to say were stuck in her throat as she couldn't bring herself to ruin the pretty smile before her. Kael. Alicia's thoughts once again shifted toward her brother. Just what was he up to? Alicia had tried to avoid thinking about him since the day she had first seen him in the academy. But one after the other, different circumstances made it impossible for her to ignore him. And now Diana had once again become entangled with him. It wasn't like Alicia didn't want her friend to be happy, but she had lost all hope in her brother a long time ago. Now, even if there had been dramatic changes, Alicia didn't believe for a second that he had truly changed. Some people never changed no matter the situations, and Kael was the same. He had always been. Though Alicia didn't want to have anything to do with it, she knew things couldn't continue to proceed like this. For her friend, for Diana's happiness. To prevent her from falling down again, Alicia had to confront him. She needed to get a read on Kael's motives before he could cause any harm to her friend.